262. A vast impenetrable forest of dense tangled tropical jungle growth covers the southern half of Yucatan and extends far into Guatemala, which is half covered by it. It extends into Chiapas and Tabasco, and stretches into Honduras. This great forest is not primeval, for once the land was densely populated with great cities and highly cultivated fields. Throughout this now impenetrable wilderness are ruins, great imposing ruins, and, if we can believe the tales of the Indians, Cupan and Quirigua, which are on the outer edge of this luxuriant jungle, are only samples of still greater ruins hidden away in the forest depths and lying beyond the present reach of the white man. Personally, I believe the tales of the Indians to be true, for they talked about these ruins with superstitious awe, which lent credence to their tales. Beyond the tales of the Indians, we have Egyptian records confirming them. The forest is part of the country beyond which was made a ruin and impassable with the loss of nearly all the people by great cataclysmic floods which rolled over the land. This civilization was wiped out and its cities wrecked between 11,500 and 11,750 years ago, when the gas belts, which run under and around this area, were being forged, with the attendant mountain raising, a little while before the submersion of Atlantis. For the Egyptians to say the country was impassable, after such devastating phenomena, is certainly a mild way of describing the conditions. At Cupan in Honduras, Quirigua in Guatemala, Opico and Siracamecalo in Salvador, there are enormous prehistoric ruins. In all these ruins one finds symbols referring to Mu. At Quirigua there are some notable stelae or obelisks, 13 in number, which have symbolical human figures carved upon them, each wearing a triple crown, thus showing their allegiance to the motherland. Each of these stelae has a different totem symbol, showing they refer to various dynasties of kings. Each of the ancient dynasties had a different totem, such as the elephant, tiger and serpent. Thus it is shown that a continuous string of records exists from end to end of the western parts of North, Central and South America, all telling us that Mu was their motherland. I have noted symbols among the savages of the South Sea Islands and on the stones of the ruins among these specks of land. I then went from the South Pacific to New Zealand, so that nothing remains but Asia to complete the circuit around the ocean. Burma and India are full of records about Mu, as I have heretofore prominently shown, corresponding in all details with those of America. 64 above, map of the Great Uyghur Empire. I think the Uyghur records will be all that is necessary to convince the most skeptical mind that it is clearly proven by symbols alone that Mu was the motherland of man. The Uyghur was the principal colonial empire belonging to Mu at the time of destroyed its eastern half. The biblical flood, which Chinese legends tell that the Uyghurs were at the height of their civilization about 17,000 years ago. This date agrees with geological phenomena. The Uyghur Empire stretched its powerful arms from the Pacific Ocean across Central Asia and into Eastern Europe from the Caspian Sea on. This was before the British Isles became separated from the continent of Europe. The southern boundary of the Uyghur Empire was along the northern boundaries of Cochin China, Burma, India and Persia, and this was before the Himalayas and the other Asiatic mountains were raised. Their northern boundary extended into Siberia, but how far there is no record to tell. Remains of their cities have been found in the southern parts of Siberia. Eventually the Uyghurs extended themselves into Europe around the western and northern shores of the Caspian Sea, as related in a very ancient Hindu record. From here they continued on through Central Europe to its western boundary, Ireland. They settled in northern Spain, northern France, and far down into the Balkan region. The late archaeological discoveries in Moravia are Uyghur remains, and the evidences on which ethnologists 65 have based their theories that man originated in Asia have been marks left by the advancing Uyghurs in Europe. The history of the Uyghurs is the history of the Aryans. Ethnologists have classed certain white races as Aryans that are not Aryans at all, but belong to a totally different line of colonization. The capital city of the Uyghurs was where the ruins of Karakhota now stand in the Gobi Desert. At the time of the Uyghur Empire, the Gobi Desert was an exceedingly fertile area of land. The Uyghurs had reached a high state of civilization and culture. They knew astrology, mining, the textile industries, architecture, mathematics, agriculture, writing, reading, medicine, etc. They were experts in decorative art on silk, metals and wood, and they made statues of gold, silver, bronze and clay, and this was before the history of Egypt commenced. About one half of the Uyghur Empire was destroyed before Mu went down, the other half subsequent to Mu's submersion. Professor Kosloff unearthed a tomb 50 feet below the surface at Karakhota and in it found wonderful treasures, which he photographed, not being allowed to disturb or take anything away. Through the courtesy of the American Weekly, I have obtained the loan of some of these pictures, 2 of which I here reproduce with their decipherings. I think I am safe in believing that these pictures represent a time between 16,000 and 18,000 years ago, halftones between pages 160 to 1. These pictures are symbolical, the various symbols telling who they are, and what they are. In the original they are paintings on silk and represent a queen and her consort in a sitting posture. I will now pick out the symbols of the queen. On her head is a 3-pointed crown with a disc in the center with 3 sets of rays emanating from it. Behind her body is a large disc, the sun. At the back of her head is a smaller disc, an inferior sun. The large disc symbolizes Mu, the small disc the Uyghur colonial empire. The crown on her head, a sun with rays on one half only, shows the escutcheon of a colonial empire. In her left hand she carries a scepter, the ends of which are in the form of a trident 3 points, the motherland's numeral. Her seat is a full-blown sacred lotus, the floral symbol of the motherland, so that she is depicted as sitting in the lap of and being upheld by Mu, the motherland. Her consort does not carry a scepter, nor has he a sun with rays, but in its place a sphere. His crown also shows the motherland's numeral. Kosloff had pictures of various scepters. This illustration is of a different pattern from the one held in the Queen's hand, and of later date, but symbolically reads the same, the ends being divided into 3 giving the numeral of the motherland. Thus we see the symbols of Asia, America, South Sea Islands and New Zealand all agreeing in the tale they tell. Could anything be more definite or convincing unless our old forefathers were to rise from their graves, to tell us by word of mouth what happened to them in the land of Mu. 66 Chapter 6 Mu, the Empire of the Sun. Many students of antiquity have noted the fact that ancient kings and emperors assumed the title, Son of the Sunday. They have, however, entirely failed to give the reason for these monarchs assuming the title, except that in many instances it is asserted they claimed to be sons of the celestial orb. To find the actual reason for the assumption of this title we must go back to the Earth's first empire or kingdom, the Empire of the Sun. This empire was formed in the motherland of man, and a royal emblem or escutcheon was devised for it. Above, the royal escutcheon of Mu, the royal escutcheon of Mu, the Empire of the Sun, was in no way a haphazard device, for every line in it has a particular meaning, as the deciphering and translation prove, the form of the shield in a conventional letter M, one of the letters in Mu's hieratic alphabet. It was her symbolical letter. Besides, the letter was her actual name, as the letter M was pronounced Mu and Mu in the language of Mu. B. This hieroglyphic is the central figure in the escutcheon and reads, Uluumil pronounced Oluumil, which, translated, is, the Empire of C. The circle enclosing the GLYPH is a picture of the sun, so that this compound GLYPH reads, the Empire of the Sunday. Then prefix the shield and it is, mu, the Empire of the Sunday. D. The sun has 8 rays, symbolizing the 8 cardinal points, thus saying that the whole earth was dominated by her. E. The circle enclosing the rays is a symbol of the universe. This universe as applied to man's universe, the earth. It is thus shown again that her rays, her influence, fall on all mankind. Thus, the royal escutcheon of Mu tells us that all mankind on earth was under her rule. Mu was mistress of the whole earth, and this is confirmed by the Codex Cortesianus, where Mu is referred to as the ruler. Traditions say that when Mu was turned into an empire, the hieratic head was selected to be the king or emperor. The hieratic head represented the deity in religious teachings. The sun, called Ra, was the collective and highest symbol of the deity. The sun was, therefore, the symbol of the King of Kings. When elected to be the king, the hieratic head assumed the title of Ra, the sun Ra being the king's symbol. To this title was added the name of the land Mu, so that the king's full title was Ra Mu, or Sun Mu. 67 above, symbols used in ancient writings and inscriptions referring to Mu. Then a new name was added to the land and it was called the Empire of the Sun. When the Empire of the Sun began is unknown. Empires and kingdoms which were under her suzerainty are traced back for more than 35,000 years. So that the commencement of the Empire of the Sun antedates 35,000 years ago by a long time. How long no one can say. It might have been only 1,000 years and again it might have been tens of thousands of years. Nothing in the shape of an old record, writing or tradition has ever turned up to give us the slightest clue on this point. Apparently, as the various colonies of the motherland became large and sufficiently able to govern themselves, they were turned into empires or kingdoms, but under the control of the motherland, so that the whole world was a great family under one control. When a colony was turned into a kingdom or empire, the first king was one of the royal family of the motherland, or possibly, in some instances, an appointee. When appointed, the new king assumed the title of Son of the Sun. This was not intended to imply that he was the son of the celestial orb, but the son of the Sun dynasty of the Empire of the Sun, or son of the Empire of the Sun. The emblem of the new king was still the sun, but in order to show that he was a subject of the motherland, or a part of it, only one half of the orb was shown above the horizon, with rays ascending from it. Valmiki, the ancient Hindu historian, speaking of the works of the Mayas in India, says, before the sun rose above the horizon, meaning before the Hindu colony was turned into an empire. When the Maya colony of the Deccan, India, was turned into a kingdom, the first king was called Rama. His emblem was the rising sun, with only one half of it showing above the horizon. He assumed the title Son of the Sun. The present Maharaja of Udaipur is said to be a direct descendant of Rama. If so, his forefathers were kings more than 30,000 years ago. Unquestionably his is the oldest royal family on earth. 68 The rising sun is the emblem of various nations today, among them being the Japanese, the Persians and some of the Central American republics. To differentiate between the rising and the setting sun, the ancients were accustomed to depict the former with rays and the latter as a plain disk or orb without rays. After the Empire of the Sun came to its untimely end, the sun whenever shown in connection with the motherland always appears as the setting sun. Symbols representing Mu used in ancient writings above, key to symbol AA, is a Maya vignette, telling of the submersion of Mu, the lands of the West. Deciphering and translation. Fig. The 3 points on the top of the GLYPH are Mu's symbolical numeral, therefore the writings below refer to Mu. Fig. 2. The 3-pointed crown is the imperial crown of Mu, the empire of the Sunday. Fig. 3. The sun without rays, therefore Mu is in the region of darkness. Fig. 4. This symbol shows Mu submerged and in darkness, peaks or points only appear. Fig. 5. This is the ancient symbol for an abyss, tank or depth. Fig. 6. These symbolize the other two lands of the west which were carried with Mu down into the tank of fire. Free reading. Mu, the empire of the sun, has fallen into an abyss. She is in the region of darkness, where the sun never shines upon her. The other lands of the west were blotted out with her. Her crown no longer rules the earth. The form of the hieroglyphic itself is a conventional abyss. B is hieratic writing reading, Mu, lands of the west. C is the motherland's numeral, 3 assigned to Mu as her numeral symbol. 69D is the hieratic letter M of the motherland's alphabet. It is also a geometrical figure. It was Mu's symbol, both alphabetical and geometrical. E is a 3-pointed geometrical figure, and was the symbol used for Mu, showing her geographical position. F is a symbol for Mu after her submersion. G is the same. Sometimes one is used, sometimes the other. H is the lotus flower in conventional form, the floral symbol for Mu. I is a Maya vignette telling of the submersion of the lands of the west. K is another form of the lotus symbolizing Mu. L is the lotus, closed and dead, symbolizing that Mu no longer exists. M is a lotus bud, used as ornamentation. N is a Maya vignette telling of the submersion of the land of Kui. O is hieratic writing reading, land of Kui. P is an Egyptian vignette symbolizing the destruction of Mu. 70 Chapter 7 Age of Mu's Civilization. I have asserted that the civilization of Mu dates back to more than 50,000 years ago. Now let us see on what foundation I base such date. Le Plongeon found in the center of the mausoleum of Ki, the high priest and eldest son of King Kan, at Chichen Itza, Yucatan, a carving of a serpent having 12 heads, with an inscription saying this serpent was a symbol of the 12 Maya dynasties that had reigned over Mayaks previous to the Kan dynasty, their combined reigns covering a period of 18,000 years. The last King Kan lived 16,000 years ago, as proved by the Trono manuscript. Add 16,000 to 18,000 years and we find that kings reigned over Mayaks 34,000 years ago. The length of the Kan dynasty is not known. There were, however, at least 6 kings, and there might have been a dozen or more, so that an approximate time of 35,000 years may be reasonably accepted as the time when the first Mayaks king reigned. Mayaks was one of Mu's colonial empires and had advanced to that status from a mere settlement. Such a radical step takes time, so that Mu's civilization must necessarily be much older than 35,000 years. These 12 dynasties of kings reigning 18,000 years are confirmed in the Chinese book Qi. Japan also has a record stating that 12 dynasties of kings reigned 18,000 years ago, and an old Hindu tablet refers to 12 dynasties of kings whose combined reigns aggregated 18,000 years, and the same fact is mentioned in an ancient Hindu manuscript. In addition to these records, there are numerous legends, both in India and China, which refer to 12 dynasties of kings whose combined reigns aggregated 18,000 years. Not one of these records, however, except the Chichen Itza inscription, gives the slightest idea where these kings reigned. Manetho, the Egyptian priest historian, in one of his papyri, writes, "The reign of the sages of Atlantis was 13,900 years. Atlantis was submerged 11,500 years ago. Now let us add 11,500 to 13,900 and we find that Atlantis was governed by kings 25,000 years ago. The first king of Atlantis commenced his reign 25,400 years ago, and the first king of Mayax 34,000 years ago. Time between the two 8,500 years. Granting the same time to have elapsed between the first emperor of Mu and the first king of Mayax, we can figure approximately that Mu was at the height of her magnificence 50,000 or more years ago. The scientific world may possibly say that the foregoing is merely speculative, so let us bring geology in to help us, and, to quote John Tyndall's favorite expression, clinch the point. When were the mountains that succeeded the great magnetic cataclysm raised? If we believe the myths of geology, we should say hundreds of thousands of years ago, and some of them millions of years ago. Now I am going to show you 7 civilizations that were in existence before the mountains were raised, some of them thousands upon thousands of years before a single mountain appeared upon the face of the earth. So, according to geology, these civilizations which came out of Mu would date her civilization back hundreds of thousands of years. However, they do not, and geology, as usual, is wrong. In the Capitol Hill, Smyrna, Asia Minor, 500 feet above the level of the sea, are to be seen the remains of 3 prehistoric civilizations, one above the other, with a stratum of sand, gravel and 71 boulders covering each civilization. These civilizations are not lying horizontally, but at an angle of 45 degrees. Please see the halftones between pages 160 to 1. Were it not for the fact that the civilizations are at an angle, following the angle of the mountain, our scientists might assert that they were built on top of the hill and had not been raised. Their angle, however, proves beyond all controversy that they existed before the mountains were raised. What are the ages of these civilizations? I leave it to the scientific world to say, also the age of these mountains in Asia Minor. 29 miles north of Mexico City, Niven has discovered 3 civilizations, buried one beneath the other, with strata of sand, gravel and boulders between them. These cities are more than 1,000 feet above sea level, with mountains of from 5,000 to 15,000 feet in altitude intervening between them and the sea. I have traced the boulders to a formation on the west coast of Mexico, and the lowest mountain between the cities and the source of the boulders is 5,000 feet in height. Did the ocean raise waves that were more than 5,000 feet in height in ancient times, when multitudes thronged the streets of these cities, so that these boulders could be formed and hurled along to their final resting place? Or did Mexico borrow a glacier for the occasion in order that these boulders might be deposited where they now lie? However, nothing of this sort happened down in Mexico. These cities were built before the mountains were raised, and, as is shown by tablets coming from them which I have deciphered and translated, they were Mu's colonies. Geologically, the lowest city dates far back into the Tertiary era and was in existence more than 50,000 years ago as a colony of Mu. Pictures and details of this archaeological discovery will be found in Chapter 11. The last example is Tiahuanaco on Lake Titicaca in the Andes. Irrefutable evidences are present in and around this ancient city, which prove that when it was built the ground on which it stands was just above sea level. Now, however, it is 15,000 feet above the sea. These facts are conclusive proofs that the civilization of Mu dates back more than 50,000 years. 72 Chapter 8 Man's first religion. Among the most interesting of questions are, how did man first learn religion? And what was the form of this religion? Ancient history supplies the information. The minds of primitive man, generally, were in such an uncultured state that they could not be brought to understand the meaning of such words, for instance, as infinite, everlasting, almighty, without some special form of teaching. To enable man to grasp such meanings, he was first taught that there was a deity and a heaven hereafter, that he had an everlasting soul which did not die, that the deity had many attributes and was all-powerful and everlasting. Then symbols such as primitive man could understand were selected to represent the deity and each of his attributes, and heaven. Thus was laid the foundation of the many pantheons, with their various symbolic meanings, that have crept into all religions down to, and including, the modern Christian religion. The most primitive forms of symbols were lines and simple geometrical figures. At first these symbols were few in number, but as time went on the number increased, also their intricacy, until we reach the period of the Egyptians, when they had become so numerous and complex that not half the Egyptian priesthood understood them all. Hermes Trismegistus in his writings said, "O Egypt! Egypt! Of all thy religion, fables only will remain which thy disciples will understand as little as they do thy religion. Words cut into stone alone will remain telling of thy pious deeds. The Scythians, or the dwellers by the Indus, or some other barbarians will inhabit thy fair land." Moses fathered the doctrine of monotheism, as an outgrowth of the Osirian religion, yet he continued the use of many of the original symbols in his teachings. In fact, some of these symbols are to be viewed today in Jewish synagogues. Christ's teachings were always in parables. He distinctly declared that he preached in parables because it was the only way the people could be brought to understand. Parables are phraseological symbols. Max Muller writes, "As soon as we know aught of the thoughts and feelings of primitive man, we find him in possession of a religion of faith or worship, of morality or ecstatic vision, a religion of fear and hope, or of surmise, or reverence of the great God through various symbols." When primitive man used a symbol, it did not mean to him the object in sight, but what it represented in his mind. This primitive and ancient custom remains dear to us. We still use symbols, as, for instance, the cross symbolizing Christ. The symbols on the walls of the Temple of Sacred Mysteries at Uxmal, Yucatan, are most valuable as applying to this work, as an inscription on the temple walls tells us that they came from the fountainhead, the lands of the West, the motherland of man. Therefore, we may safely assume that the symbols are duplicates of the symbols first used in the religious teachings of man, a statement that is further confirmed by the fact that many of them are carved on the stones of the South Sea Island ruins. These symbols connect mankind throughout the world with the motherland of man, that land of Ku-Mu. As before stated, among the fallen ruins on some of the South Sea Islands are numerous symbols of this sort. I have no doubt that if the walls were still standing intact, all would be adorned with such symbols, as these temples and ruins were within man's first earthly domain. It must be fully appreciated by the reader that the complex cosmogonic figures could only have come into existence after man's mind had been sufficiently educated to understand them. Probably thousands upon thousands of years elapsed between the time when primitive man was first taught that the circle represented infinity and the time when the intricate and complex cosmogonic diagrams 73 were intelligible to his more enlightened mind. Thus we find that tens of thousands of years ago man was so advanced intellectually he could master these intricate symbolic problems. The wide scope of these symbols and their common meanings prove them to have been of common origin. Records in Yucatan show that they came from the land of Mu. Egyptian records show that they originated in the lands of the West, and Hindu and other Oriental countries that they came from the motherland in the East. Therefore, I think I have established clearly in the mind of the reader this one dominant fact: the land of Mu, the lands of the West, that land of Kui and the biblical Garden of Eden are one and the same. In this chapter I am showing many of the ancient sacred symbols, giving their origin and original meanings. These are of particular interest to Freemasons as they not only reveal the origin of Freemasonry but also its great antiquity. Hitherto the origin of this brotherhood has never been known. It has been traced back in Egypt to a time about 5000 BC. But the question as to where the Egyptians got it has never been answered. This is a page in the history of religion that has never been read. This chapter will turn the leaf. It has been generally thought that Freemasonry originated in Egypt, and that the symbols used in their ceremonies are of Egyptian origin. This is an error. We must go back tens of thousands of years before the foot of man trod the soil of Egypt to come at the origin of what today is called Freemasonry. The sacred writings of the motherland which were carried by the Ngals, Holy Brothers, to Emu's colonies throughout the world 70,000 years or more ago, if we can depend on the accuracy of the movements of celestial bodies, is the oldest written information about the origin of Freemasonry. The extreme age of this brotherhood is not only attested to by the sacred writings but by various Oriental writings, inscriptions and prehistoric temples, and convincingly confirmed by Niven's Mexican stone tablets which are, as shown by some of them, over 12,000 years old. From the foregoing mass of records, it is shown without the possibility of controversy that our present-day Freemasonry is the fragments of man's first religious teachings, man's first expression of his worship and adoration of the Heavenly Father. The basis of this religion was the love and adoration of the Creator as the Heavenly Father, and love for all mankind as brothers. Man's first religion was the simplest in form, and the purest form of worship of the great infinite that has ever been taught and followed on this earth. It was a monotheistic religion, as only one creator or deity was worshipped, to which they gave many attributes, each attribute having a symbol assigned to it. At the same time the greatest precaution was apparently taken to prevent the impression that there was more than one creator or deity, for in all ceremonies the symbol La'an, see page 43, is conspicuously embodied. La'an translated is both in one -- all in one. Fundamentally there is no difference between the ancient and the present-day conception of the deity. The ancients gave him many attributes, mentioning them singly. We also give him many attributes but group them by saying everything comes from God. So, virtually, it is only a difference in phraseology. These remnants of man's first religion have been handed down orally from generation to generation for about 12,000 years, since the time of the submersion of the motherland. These scraps have been correctly and faithfully passed on by those who have preceded us. One passage in the sacred writings I wish particularly to call to the attention of Master Masons. It reads, "To man, the Creator is incomprehensible. Being incomprehensible, he can neither be pictured nor named, he is the nameless." 74. This passage is taken from the Naga copy. Laosa. 604 BC, the Tao that can be expressed in words is not the eternal Tao. The name which can be uttered is not his eternal name. Without a name he is the beginning of heaven and earth. Ceaseless in action he cannot be named. He is the nameless. In the ancient hieratic numeral writings the number 10 was assigned to the Creator. This number was never spoken or written. It was considered sacrilegious to speak, write or carve the numeral 10. When it became necessary to use the number, the Glyph La'an, see page 43, was given in its place. The circle, page 139. IA. The circle was one of the first three symbols used in man's religious teachings. It was looked upon as the most sacred of all symbols. It was a picture of the sun, called Ra, and was the monotheistic or collective symbol of all the attributes of the deity. The sun, as Ra, was looked upon as the symbol only and in no way the deity himself. The deity was worshipped, and the symbol used only to represent him. The deity was treated with such reverence that his name was never spoken. The Mayas, Hindus, Uyghurs and all other ancients spoke of the deity as the nameless. The circle has no beginning nor has it an end. What more perfect symbol could have been devised or selected to teach an uncultured mind the meaning of infinity and everlasting? Evidently the reason for selecting the sun as the emblem of the deity was because it was the most powerful object that came within the sight and reasoning power of primitive man. It well represented the all-powerful. The sun is found depicted on the stones of Polynesian ruins, on the walls of the Temple of Sacred Mysteries, in Egypt, Babylonia, Peru and all ancient lands and countries. It was a universal symbol. Fig. Ib. In all the Egyptian symbols representing the deity, the heads are crowned with a disc, a picture of the sun as Ra. Fig. I. See a red sphere was occasionally used to cap pillars and the heads of statues erected to the memory of departed ones. The red spheres found on the heads of Easter Island The red spheres found on the heads of Easter Island statuary are examples of the latter. They represent the sun as Ra. The ancients used the red sphere in a manner similar to the use of the cross by Christians today. Egyptian Papyrus Annana. The following are interesting quotations from an Egyptian papyrus by Annana, dated about 1320 BC. Annana was the chief scribe and a king's counselor to Seti II. Behold! Is it not written in this roll? Read, ye who shall find in the days unborn, if your gods have given you skill. Read, O children of the future, and learn the secrets of that past, which to you is so far away and yet in truth so near. Men do not live once only and then depart hence forever. They live many times in many places, although not always on this world. Between each life there is a veil of darkness. The doors will open at last, and show us all the chambers through which our feet have wandered from the beginning. Our religion teaches us that we live eternally. Now eternity, having no end, can have no beginning, it is a circle. Therefore if the one be true, namely, that we live on, it would seem that the other must be true, namely, that we have always lived. 75 In the early days before priests froze the thoughts of man into blocks of stone and built of them shrines to 1,000 gods, many held that this reasoning was true, as then they held that there was but one God. To men's eyes God has many faces, and each one swears that the one he sees is the only true God. Yet they are all wrong, for all are true. Our kas, which are our secret selves, show them to us in various ways. Drawing from the infinite well of wisdom that is hidden in the being of every man, give us glimpses of the truth, as they give us who are instructed power to work marvels. The spirit should not be judged by the body, or the god by his house. Among the Egyptians the scarabæus beetle is no god, but an emblem of the Creator, because it rolls a ball of mud between its feet and sets therein its eggs to hatch. As the Creator rolls the world that seems to be round, and causes it to produce life. All gods send their gift of love upon the earth, without which it would cease to be. My faith teaches me more clearly perhaps than yours, that life does not end with death and therefore that love, being life's soul, must endure while it endures. The strength of this invisible tie will bind two souls together long after the world is dead. If you lose one you greatly love, take comfort. Death is the nurse that puts it to sleep, no more, and in the morning it will wake again to travel through another day with those who have companioned it from the beginning. From another papyrus by Annana, dated 1320 BC, eternity has no end, therefore no beginning, consequently eternity is a circle. If we live on we must continue forever, and if we continue forever, like the circle and eternity, man had no beginning. Man comes into being many times, yet knows nothing of his past lives, except occasionally some daydream or a thought carries him back to some circumstance of a previous incarnation. He cannot, however, determine in his mind when or where the circumstance occurred, only that it is something familiar. In the end, however, all of his past lives will reveal themselves. The spirits or souls of one incarnation possibly may meet again in another incarnation, and may be drawn together as if by a magnet, but for what cause neither knows. Christ said, "Except ye be born again ye cannot enter the kingdom of heaven." Egyptian papyrus. Yes, I believe that souls can live longer than the sun himself, longer than the stars. As it was believed the soul could outlive the sun, it clearly shows that the sun was a symbol of the deity only. The equilateral triangle, page 139. Fig. 2. The origin and meaning of the equilateral triangle are extremely interesting. The equilateral triangle is another of the first three symbols designed for the religious teachings of early man. It dates back beyond 50,000 years. It was designed to symbolize both the Trinity and heaven. Legend says its origin came out of the geographical makeup of the motherland, which consisted of three separate areas of land, which were geographically called the lands of the West. Legend says that they emerged at different times, one following the other. To explain this to the then undeveloped minds of the greater part of men, it was taught that three separate attributes of the Creator were instrumental in the emerging of the three lands, but only one Creator was involved. 76. The equilateral triangle was selected as a visible figure through which man could see and understand the conception of a triune God. These three attributes formed the first Trinity and were the original conception of a Trinity. A conception which has come down to us through all these eons of time. It can never die, although from age to age its vestments have been changed, and it has been known under different names and guises among different peoples. In connection with its symbolizing the Trinity, it was used to symbolize heaven. As the triangle symbolized the triune Godhead, and God's house was heaven, it naturally followed that where God was, that was heaven. The four-sided square, page 139. Fig. 3. The four-sided square is the third of the first three symbols that were used in man's religious teachings. It symbolized the earth. The four corners represented the four cardinal points, north, south, east and west. At each corner a keeper was assigned. The earth having four corners is a conception brought down to us from early man, for are we not guilty of occasionally referring to the four corners of the earth? All of these three sacred symbols are found carved on the stones of the South Sea Island ruins and among all ancient peoples. These symbols were universal. This completes the list of the earliest of the sacred symbols. Following these are compounds with one or more of the foregoing three as the foundation. As we move down through time, the sacred symbols become more complex and complicated, ending in the well-known cosmogonic diagrams which symbolize the whole of their religious conceptions as they stood at the time. Triangle with three stars, page 139. Fig. 4. The equilateral triangle with three stars within symbolizes heaven with the triune God within. Various peoples had various names for the three attributes forming the one God. This was a matter of different languages only. Triangle with five stars, page 139. Fig. 5. The equilateral triangle with five stars within symbolizes the full Godhead of five, consisting of the Creator and his four great primary forces which at his command evolved law and order out of chaos throughout the universe, and then created all therein. Triangle above the square, page 139. Fig. 6. This is a compound symbol made up of figs 2 and 3 and symbolizes heaven above earth, a very old conception but one that still remains with us. Above does not refer to altitude, it means a higher plane of perfection. Triangle with 3 stars above square, page 139. Fig. 7. This is a compound of figs. 3 and 4. This symbol is found at the end of the north room, the room of initiation in the Temple of Sacred Mysteries, Uxmal. Triangle with 5 stars above square, page 139. Fig. 8. This is a compound of figs. 3 and 5. It is found at the end of the south room, the hall of raising in the Temple of Sacred Mysteries, Uxmal. The initiate then passed into the south room from the room of initiation where he was taught the mysteries of the Triune Godhead, and there he was initiated in the mysteries of the full Godhead of 5. He was now ready to pass into the central room, then to the Holy of Holies, where he became a master and an adept. Referring back to the circle, page 139. At a very early period we find the plane circle being used for various symbolizing other than the Creator, so that, from a certain period in the history of man, the ancients used certain variations of the circle when symbolizing the Creator. Fig. 9. A circle having a dot in the center was the Naga or southern design for the Creator's symbol. Fig. 10. A circle having an eye in the center was used, but in a limited way by all ancient peoples. 77. Above, ancient sacred symbols. Fig. 11. A circle within a circle was the Uyghur or northern design. When the Aryans, who were Uyghurs, infiltrated into northern India, they brought with them the Uyghur symbols, so that, after many Aryans had settled in India, we find many of the Uyghur symbols as common as the Naga. The sun as the symbol Ra is prominent. The Uyghur pattern of the symbol also found its way into Babylonia and into Egypt, carried to these sub-colonies by people from India. 78. The toe, page 145. The toe is not only one of the most interesting, but one of the most ancient symbols. It is found in the earliest writings of the motherland, the sacred inspired writings. It symbolizes both resurrection and immersion. Resurrection, a springing into life, and immersion, the raising of land above the waters. The toe is a picture of the Southern Cross. The reason for its adoption as the symbol for resurrection was, when the Southern Cross appeared at a certain angle in the heavens over Mu, it brought the long-looked-for rain. With the rain, seeds in the ground sprang into life. Drooping foliage revived and sent forth fresh shoots, upon which flowers and fruit grew. Then it became a time of plenty and rejoicing in Mu. Life had been resurrected. As the symbol of immersion it takes a prominent place both in the Ngul writings of India, and in the old Mexican writings as shown in Niven's tablet number 18. In both cases it is the symbol of Mu, the motherland's immersion. The toe is very prominent in the old Maya writings and is generally depicted as a tree with 2 branches upon it with flowers and fruit. Maya vignette. British Museum number 9789, page 147. This vignette comes from a Maya manuscript which is in the British Museum, and represents the rain arriving in Yucatan. The 2 figures are allegorical, representing the divisions of Mayaks. Trono manuscript, page 148. This depicts the return of the rainy season in Mayaks. Above, the toe from a Maya manuscript 79. The toe was a universal symbol. It is found in the writings of the Hindus, Chinese, Chaldeans, Incas, Quiches, Egyptians and other ancient peoples. It played an important part in ancient religions. Altars in temples, on which were made offerings of fruit and flowers, were built in the shape of the toe. The name and the spelling of this symbol have never been changed. It was Tau in the motherland and it is Tau with us today. In the motherland every letter in a word was sounded, A was pronounced dh and U was pronounced O. The pronunciation therefore is Ta-U. The Polynesians pronounce it correctly to this day. The two-sided square, Fig 13, page 145. The two-sided square is one of the most prominent symbols in Freemasonry and has an exceedingly ancient origin, dating back to the time when early man was first receiving religious instruction. How long ago was that? I cannot say, nor even guess. Above, return of the rainy season from the Trono manuscript in two very old Nkul tablets, one of which is in India and the other in Tibet. It is stated that man first appeared on earth in the land of Mu about 200,000 years ago, and in other Nkul writings it would appear that his religious teaching was not long delayed after his arrival, but, how long was long? That cannot be estimated or even guessed at, so that this point must remain an open question until fate ordains that it shall be known. But whichever way we look at it, whether the period was 1,000 years or tens of thousands of years, the extreme antiquity of the two-sided square is clearly shown, consequently, the great antiquity of what is now called Freemasonry. 80 above. Mexican two-sided squares. The two-sided square is the spelling of an ancient word meaning builder. In the religious teachings the great primary forces were often referred to as the builders of the universe and all therein. Among Niven's Mexican stone tablets there are hundreds where the two-sided square appears in the writings. I am giving a plate of 16 of these tablets as examples, numbers 963, 900, 925, 1315, 237, 385, 1825, 1827, 659, 236, 1354, 1360, 446, 716, 908 and 1004. These are Niven's numbers. He numbered tablets in the order in which he found them. The two-sided square has always been prominent in Egyptian cosmogony. The earliest date at which I find the two-sided square in Egyptian writings is of the time of Men's, about 5000 BC. Yet here in America we find it exceedingly prominent 12,000 years or more ago, 5,000 years before we find it in Egypt. Even 12,000 years ago in America, it was then very old, as we find it prominent in the Nkul writings more than 50,000 years ago. The two-sided square was one of the symbols of the god Te. Te was one of the oldest of the Egyptian gods. Te has many titles, one of which was the builder. 81 The two-sided square became prominent in Egypt as the seal of Osiris. In the Great Hall of Truth in Amenti, when judging the souls of the dead, Osiris is shown sitting on the two-sided square. I am giving a cut from the Papyrus Anana, in the British Museum, showing Mate the goddess of truth and justice seated on the two-sided square, also below, Osiris sitting on the two-sided square. The Ka. Page 145. Fig. 14. This symbol, so well known to Freemasons, is found on a cornice above the lintel to the entrance of the Holy of Holies of the Temple of Sacred Mysteries at Uxmal. On the cornice this symbol is many times repeated. These emblems of mortality were used in the ancient religious ceremonies to impress upon the adept what his end would be and to fix firmly in his mind the necessity of living a life that would bring no terrors when the soul released itself from the mortal to pass into the world beyond. Above, two-sided square symbols found on Egyptian papyri. 82 The Egyptian is a reflection of the Maya, so that from Egypt we can get the original ceremonies. In the temple of the Great Pyramid there was a sarcophagus with the emblems of mortality arranged alongside it. The adept was placed in the sarcophagus that he might contemplate these tokens of his earthly existence, and when he emerged from it, a reminder was given him that after his soul left the mortal body another life awaited him. In the quiche ritual, a similar ceremony is gone through in the seventh house, the house of the bat. Triangles with central figures, page 145. Figs 15 and 16. These two glyphs originally symbolized the all-seeing eye looking out from heaven. The Egyptians changed it to the all-seeing eye of Osiris looking down from heaven. Crossed interlaced triangles, page 145. Fig. 17. Two triangles interlaced within a circle. This figure will be dissected and deciphered in the cosmic diagram of the motherland, where it forms the central figure. Fig. 18. The startling point about this figure is that within two outer crossed triangles there are two smaller crossed triangles which appear in the Sri Santara, the cosmic diagram of the Hindus, and again among the Pueblo Indians of our southwestern states. Fig. 19. Here the central figure is a plain cross, the original symbol of the sacred four. This appears in the Babylonian cosmic diagram. The double triangle, page 145. Fig. 20. A pair of double triangles bound together at their bases was the ancient symbol for an offering. This symbol often appears under the arms of the law altars in temples. The Great Y, page 145. Fig. 21. Taking their learning and religious conceptions from the Uyghurs, their forebears on the paternal side, the Chinese replaced the equilateral triangle at the time of Confucius with the figure Y. This they called the Great Term, the Great Unite, the Great Y. The Y has neither body nor shape. All that has a body and shape was made by that which has no shape. The Great Term or the Great Unite comprehends three: one is three and three are one. Feathers, page 145. From the beginning the feather has played an important part in symbolisms. The feather in the motherland was the symbol for truth. It is also prominent in Egyptian, symbolizing the emblem of truth. It was always colored blue in Egypt. Fig. 22. Except in later times in Egypt, a straight feather was always used in the crown of the king and the headdress of the high priest. A plume of 3 yellow feathers was worn in Mu, the motherland. Fig. 23. The ostrich feather was used in Egypt, except on the heads of their ancient gods, where the straight feather was retained. The 8 roads to heaven, page 154. This is a page of symbols all saying there are 8 roads to heaven. Each country and each people seem to have had their own views as to the most appropriate way of forming a symbol to express this conception. But Niven's old Mexicans outdid them all. I find scores of tablets in his collection with a figure symbolizing the 8 roads to heaven. I have selected tablets numbers 1109, 277, 736, 405, 694, 295, 58 and 1111 as representative. From the Hindu we learn that the 8 roads to heaven consisted of actions and thoughts in life, and were: 1. Right belief, 2. Right speech, 3. Right living, 4. Right thought. 83 above, the 8 roads to heaven. 5. Right action, 6. Right exertions, 7. Right meditation, 8. Right adoration of God. 84 above, pillars. Pillars as sacred emblems are without doubt of extremely ancient origin. It is my firm belief they date back to the first temple ever erected for the worship of the deity. 85 above, a temple entrance. Pillars in ancient times were placed in the porches or entrances to temples. The oldest record of their use as sacred emblems comes from Niven's Mexican buried cities. Herewith is shown the entrance to a temple, Niven's tablet number 50, with 2 pillars, one on each side of the entrance. From the numeral writing on each of these pillars it appears they are emblems and symbolical of the sacred four. This writing is confirmed by the glyph over the center of the arch, which is the hieratic letter H in the alphabet of the motherland and the alphabetical symbol of the sacred four. The ancient pillar was built in 4 divisions, each division being a cube. These were capped with symbols. On the left-hand pillar a square is placed. The square was the ancient symbol for strength. The right-hand pillar was capped with the glyph expressing completion, established, finished. The origin of pillars as sacred emblems was the symbolizing of them for the 4 great primary forces, the commands of the Creator in the beginning, and the 2 symbols which crown these pillars say that by following out the commands of the Creator the universe is established in strength. It was, however, left to the Egyptians to run a riot of designs for the sacred pillars. Like all other symbols, they carried this symbolism to an extreme, but in all of their designs they retained a prominent feature to show that they were symbols of the sacred four, generally 4 bars across the top. In their mythology the Egyptians placed 2 pillars at the entrance to Amenti. I give a group of Egyptian pillars with the beautiful ones at the entrance to Amenti, from the papyrus Oni 1500 BC, British Museum. Numbers 3 to 6 are taken from the Book of the Dead. The Egyptians called them Tat pillars, but they are more commonly known throughout the world as totem pillars. By the Egyptians one pillar is called Tat, which means in strength. The other pillar is called Tatu, which means to establish. When combined, these 2 words mean, in strength this place is established forever. 86 The Tat in Egyptian is considered a figure of stability. It also represents 4 corners and is equal to a square. 2 tats form the entrance to Tatu. Tatu is the gateway to the region where the mortal soul is blended with an immortal spirit and established in the mysteries of Amenti forever. In the porch, or entrance, to King Solomon's temple, 2 special pillars were erected, I Kings 7:21-22 and he set up the pillars in the porch of the temple, and he set up the right pillar, and called the name thereof Jachin, and he set up the left pillar and called the name thereof Boaz. In Hebrew the word Jachin means to establish and the word Boaz means in strength. At the entrance to King Solomon's temple and also at the entrance of the judgment hall of Osiris 2 pillars were erected. In each case the 2 pillars have identically the same name, language considered, and with the identical meaning. Also the ornamentations on the pillars, down to the lily work, were identical, showing that King Solomon made a complete copy of the pillars at the entrance to Amenti for his own temple in Jerusalem. Pillars are erected by the Maoris of New Zealand at the entrances to their villages, and similar pillars are used by the American Indians of the Northwest. Plato informs us, speaking of Atlantis, there the people gathered every 5th year and 6th year alternately, and with sacrifice of bulls, swore to observe the sacred inscriptions carved on the pillars of the temple. Java is one of the large islands of the Malay archipelago, and in writing of it, Forbes says, in Java is a tribe called Karangs, supposed to be descendants of the aborigines of the island, whose old men and youths, 4 times a year, repair secretly in procession to a sacred grove in a dense forest, the old men to worship, the youths to see and learn the mysteries of their forefathers. In this grove are the ruins of terraces laid out in quadrilateral enclosures, the boundaries of which are marked by blocks of stone, or fixed in the ground. Here and there on the terraces are conspicuous monuments, erect pillars, and, especially noteworthy, a pillar erect within a square. Here these despised and secluded people follow the rites and customs that have been handed down to them through their forefathers from vastly remote ages, repeating with superstitious awe a litany which they do not understand or comprehend. This very litany is found in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. I have emphasized a pillar erect within a square because that, too, is found in the Book of the Dead. Above, an ancient pillar, and a cube. The ancient pillar. The first pillars that I have any record of consisted of 4 cubes placed one on top of the other and capped with symbols. The pillar on the left was square and had placed on its top a square, the pillar on the right was round and had the symbol established. These pillars were symbolical of the sacred 4 who established in strength, law and order throughout the universe. 1. The shape of these pillars is shown on the ground plan of one of Nivio's Mexican temples, page 258. 87b. The cube. The cube is of special interest to Royal Archmasons. An account of its finding is given in the rubric of the 64th chapter of the Book of the Dead. Translation by Purit, Turin copy. This chapter was found out in Hermopolis on a brick of burnt clay, written in blue under the feet of the god Thoth. The finding out, at the time of King Menkaura, whose word is truth, was made by Prince Hatitaif in this place, when he was traveling to inspect the temples. It related in itself a hymn which transported him to ecstasy. He removed it to the king's chariot as soon as he saw what was drawn on the cube, a great mystery. Papyrus dated 3733 BC, London copy. This chapter was found in the city of Khemenu upon a block of iron from the south, which had been inlaid with letters of real lapis lazuli, under the foot of God during the reign of His Majesty the King of the North and the South Menkaura triumphant by the royal son Hiru-Tata-F triumphant. He found it when journeying about to make an inspection of the temples. One Nekhit was with him, who was diligent in making him to understand it, and he brought it to the king as a wonderful object, when he saw that it was a thing of great mystery which had never before been seen or looked upon. Papyrus. Mizemneta. 4266 BC, 2. This chapter was found in the foundation, on a plinth, of the shrine of the divine Henu boat by the chief mason in the time of the King of the North and the South, Hasepti triumphant. A Mexican cube. Tablet number 151 of Niven's collection. This stone cube was found by William Niven, at Santiago Ayuzochtla, in amongst scores of other stone tablets. Its surfaces are 10.5 inches across. To the date given this papyrus seems doubtful. 88 above, Narayana, the 7-headed serpent Narayana, the 7-headed serpent, the symbol of the creator and creation. Nara means divine one, Yana creator of all things, Ngal's 7 superlative intellects, Vedanta 7 mental planes. Above, the submersion of Mu above, a volcanic cataclysm such as completed the destruction of the Maya edifices in Yucatan 89 above, Princess Arawali of Ararai Island, Gilba Group 90 above, an Alaskan totem pole 91 above, the pyramid at Xochicalco House of Taga, Tinian Island, Mariana Group above, a stone arch on Tongatabu 92 above, a Nuier queen and her consort, and a scepter carried by a monarch of the Uyghurs 93 above, a bronze statuette of Mu receiving man's soul from the Creator 94 above, the great 7-headed serpent of Angkor Cambodia above, the road cut, Capitol Hill, Smyrna, Asia Minor 95 above, a Mexican cube. William Niven is a mason of high degree. He called my particular attention to this stone. There is one great difference between this cube and the Egyptian. The Egyptian shows the cube physically doubled. The symbol on the top of this cube is the hieratic letter H quadrupled within itself. This means one of two things: the quadrupling either forms an adjective, emphasizing, or, it says physically quadrupled. This last meaning appeals to me as the correct one, because, at the time of these writings, when an adjective was used, although the same letter it was a different glyph, as I have heretofore explained. Beyond this difference, the reading of the two cubes is essentially the same. The 4 great primary forces, the sacred 4. Apparently, from the beginning, the 4 great primary forces, called in the Ngul writings the Sacred Four, have played a cardinal part in man's religion. It would appear that most of the ancient theology was based on their workings, and many theological lines and divergences sprang from them. They are not dead. They remain with us to this day, although, from the start, their vestments have been changed from time to time and theological trimmings constantly added. In ancient times it was quite popular to dedicate temples to these forces. In all of the plans of temples among Niven's Mexican stone tablets I find that every one was dedicated to the Sacred Four as representative of the almighty power of the Creator, symbolic of his power. The earliest symbol of the Sacred Four I found in the Ngul writings of 70,000 years ago. It was a plain cross plus. As time wore on there were three developments of this original cross, ending in 96-1. The swastika 2. A form of the Maltese cross, and 3. The winged circle. All crosses are symbols of the Sacred Four. It seems not out of place, at this point, to give an explanation of the Sacred Four, and to define clearly the difference between them and the 7 great commands of creation, because I find that some of our Egyptologists have gravely erred concerning them. The Sacred Four were the executors of the 7 commands. Tersely put, the Creator gave 7 commands and the Sacred Four carried them out. The ancient conception was, in the beginning chaos reigned throughout the universe, which was in darkness and without sound. Then the Creator, desiring to create worlds, commanded his 4 great forces to establish law and order in the universe so that creations might commence. When law and order became established, the creations were carried out by the Sacred Four according to his desires and commands. This paragraph is from a very old Ngul writing and is the identical cosmogony shown in the Mexican tablets, proving clearly that the origin of the Mexican tablets is the same as the Ngul, namely, the sacred inspired writings of Mu. Apparently all ancient peoples had their special names for the Sacred Four according to their language, some had scores of names for them. They were designated as the Sacred Four, the 4 Great Ones, the 4 Powerful Ones, the 4 Strong Ones, the 4 Great Kings, the 4 Great Maharajas, the 4 Great Builders, the 4 Great Architects, the 4 Great Geometricians, etc. A little later on I find them also called the 4 Great Pillars of the Universe, the 4 Genii, etc. Still later, the Amshasbands by the Mazdians, the Elohim and Seraphs by the Hebrews, the Rabbiari and Tetons in Hesiod's Theogony, and today they are the Archangels of the Christians and Mohammedans. 97 above. Group of 20 cross tablets. Not only did the Sacred Four get sundry names bestowed upon them by various people, but symbols in the form of crosses were designed to emphasize the names. Niven's old Mexicans ran an artistic riot in these cross designs, many of which were very beautiful. I have over 100 of these designs. The swastika, however, always retained a warm corner in their hearts. Among many the winged circle became the favorite expression for the Sacred Four. The Egyptians produced some wonderfully artistic and beautiful designs of the winged circle. I give here a plate including 20 of Niven's Mexican stone tablets with crosses on them, also, the key for their reading. 98 above, key for the reading of cross symbols. Key for the reading of cross symbols. I. The first original for the Sacred Four. A plain cross. 2. The oldest form of looped cross. 3. Circle with a dot in the center. The southern Ornaga symbol of the sun as Ra, the monotheistic symbol. 4. A double circle. The northern Oya symbol of the sun as Ra, the monotheistic symbol of the deity. 5. Builder. 6. Architect. 7. Geometrician. 8. The master builder. 9. Established, erected. 10. Strength. 11. Hieratic letter H, the alphabetical symbol of the sacred four. 12 completed. The order has been carried out and has been completed. 13 pillar. 14 heaven. 15 a primary force. 16 active. A spear, arrow, javelin or dart. 17 a plane circle around the cross symbolizes the universe, intimating that the forces are working throughout the universe. The circle symbolizing the universe was called Ul. Ul translated means the end of space. So that where this circle is used it refers to the end of space, and includes the whole universe. I have translated some glyphs as builder, architect and geometrician, etc., because these words are equivalents for the Naga names of these glyphs. What the actual names were among these old Mexicans in their own language I cannot tell. They had, however, a language of their own, varying considerably from the Naga. The Naga and Mexican symbols being the same, undoubtedly the meanings were the same. Names were given them to complete their sacred mysteries, to hide from the layman the fact that they were the primary forces. Fortunately these forces are so minutely explained in other tablets that it becomes easy to give them modern names with their origins and workings. 3. The swastika, popularly called the good luck symbol and one of the many symbols of the four great primary forces, was a favorite symbol among the ancients throughout the world and still clings to the hearts of present humanity. It belongs to the group of Masonic symbols as much as any which they use, and a great deal more so than many. 99. But the poor old swastika has had its troubles. For a long time the ancients would not let it stay put. Let us see what it went through. 3. Pythagoras on his return from Egypt taught that the numeral 4 referred to the great creative forces. Above, the evolution and meaning of the swastika, and key fig. 1 is the original figure 4 symbolizing the four great primary forces. Fig. 2 is a change made, but at what date I cannot say. The circle symbolizes the Creator, so the cross, being within the circle, makes it imperative to include the Creator when speaking of the four great forces only. So a change was made. Fig. 3. In this figure the ends of the cross are projected beyond the circle, then bent over at right angles pointing west with the symbol of the Creator in the center. This did not meet the requirements, for the four great forces could not now be spoken of without mentioning and including the Creator. Fig. 4. In this figure the symbol of the Creator is removed, leaving a compound glyph made up of the symbols of the four great builders, joined together in such a manner that they form a cross, called the swastika, in which form it has been retained to present time. The esoteric or hidden meaning of the swastika. The priesthood had a meaning for this cross beyond that which they communicated to the layman. A is the glyph reading builder. B. The cross split open showing the four builders. C. is the glyph reading geometrician. D. is the glyph reading architect. E. reads the 3 steps to the throne. F. shows the four builders forming a square. This not only reads the four great builders but the four great strong ones. It is also the original symbol for the earth, which is the four-sided square. Legend. At the command of the Creator the four great primary forces built the universe and all therein. They the four great builders, the heavenly architects and geometricians, the four great strong ones built the earth and formed its life. 100 above, the butterfly-winged circle. The butterfly-winged circle. Nivanti Mexican stone tablet number 66. The oldest known winged circle, probably the mother of all winged circles, date over 10,000 BC. The winged circle. The winged circle is one of the last, if not the very last, design for symbolizing the four great primary forces, unless we include our present-day conception, which is the archangel, represented to us as a human form with wings and trumpet. All of the wings on the following circles are feathered. Above, the oldest of the feather-winged circles. The oldest example of a winged circle with feathers I found in a venerable Hindu manuscript. The manuscript was a copy of some sacred writings, so that the age is unknown. It consisted of the second figure shown in the evolution of the swastika with a pair of feathered rings. Above, Guatemalan. Out of the 2,600 tablets found by Niven in Mexico, there is only one winged circle, and this one is totally unlike any of the others. All the others have wings feathered like a bird. This Mexican example has butterfly wings. 101 above, winged circle symbols legends. To find the winged circle at its most prosperous era we must come down to the time of the Assyrians, Babylonians and Egyptians, from 3000 BC down to 1000 BC. Above, Egyptian winged circle symbol. A winged circle painted on the end wall of the funeral chamber of Queen Hatshepsut. She it was who, when Princess of Egypt, pulled Moses out of the bulrushes. The curved form implies exceptional protection. 102 above, Greek winged circle symbol. Another one of unknown date was sent to me as coming from Greece. 103 Chapter 9 Symbols, vignettes, tableaus and diagrams. The cosmogonic diagram of the land of Mu was the first book written by man. I have traced this diagram back to more than 35,000 years ago. Just how long it had been in use before that, no one can say or even estimate. All the ancient nations copied the motherland's diagram: the Mayas of Yucatan, the Nagamayas of India, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Egyptians and the Pueblo Indians of southwestern North America. Only one retained its simple character with its original meanings, the Yucatan Mayas. The rest, except the Pueblos, added figures and introduced dogmas. They gave some of the original figures different meanings, so that the simple and beautiful symbol of the motherland became sadly distorted. This was brought about by the unscrupulous Egyptian priesthood. They first invented the devil, then they had to find an abode for him, so they invented hell. 5,000 years ago the devil and hell were unknown. The priesthood of India, seeing the effect on the people of these inventions, were quick to follow set with Siva. In Mu the novice was taught to learn this book thoroughly and to repeat it as his belief in God and the hereafter, just as children are taught their Bibles today. 104 above, the cosmogonic diagram of the land of Mu. Over 35,000 years old. In deciphering this cosmic diagram it will be seen that there is a central circle enclosed within two interlaced equilateral triangles. They form one single figure, having but one meaning. These two triangles are enclosed within an outer circle, which leaves 12 divisions between the two circles. Again, this outer circle is enclosed within 12 scallops. Falling from the main figure and downward is a ribbon that has 8 divisions. The central circle is a picture of the sun, Ra, who is the collective symbol of the deity, and as the deity is in heaven, the deity and heaven being symbolized by this circle. The 12 divisions formed by the two interlaced triangles, between the two circles, symbolize the 12 gates to heaven. Each gate symbolizes a virtue, so that the soul must possess the 12 virtues in order to enter the gates of heaven. The outer circle symbolizes the intermediate world, the world beyond, the Amenti of the Egyptians. The 12 scallops surrounding the intermediate world symbolize 12 temptations. The soul must prove that it has overcome the 12 earthly temptations before it can enter the 12 gates of the world beyond. 105 The ribbon falling downward symbolizes that the soul must ascend in order to reach heaven. The ancient meaning of the word ascend as used here did not signify rising to an altitude. It meant to rise to a higher level towards perfection. The ribbon has 8 divisions. These signify the 8 roads that man must traverse before his soul may enter the world beyond. I have given a description of what the 8 roads to heaven are in the previous chapter. What the 12 temptations and the 12 virtues were I have never been able to discover collectively. This ancient religious belief of the people of Mu, freely given in modern language, would read, I believe there are 8 roads which I must travel in order to reach heaven. After having traveled the 8 roads, mentioning them, I arrive at the 12 gates leading to the world beyond. Here I must prove that I have overcome the 12 earthly temptations, mentioning them. I shall then pass through into the world beyond and reach the gates of heaven. There I must show that I learned and practiced the 12 virtues on earth, mentioning them. Then I am taken through the gates of heaven to the throne of glory, where sits the heavenly King. Have we today among all our sects and religions any that is purer and more simple than this of the lost people of the motherland of man? Figures with many arms. During the years that followed the translation of the tablets, we found the solution of many characters which we could not read in the tablets themselves. When deciphering old symbolical figures, which writers and archaeologists call grotesque gods and grotesque goddesses, also bas-reliefs, we found the undeciphered symbols mixed in such a way in these carvings that their meanings became perfectly apparent. Chandler and others have written, some grotesque Hindu goddess. The following is a specimen of these grotesque gods with the decipherings and translations of it, by which it will be seen that the figure is a tableau, depicting the advent of man in the land of Mu. In India, especially, one is constantly finding carvings and paintings of the figure of a man having more than one pair of arms. These figures are found on temple walls, in illustrations in old Hindu manuscripts, and are extensively used at the present time in Hindu native jewelry. These figures are not idols. They are sacred symbols of the great Creator and creation. They are of a very intricate design and character, the sort that one meets with occasionally when studying the first writings of man. They symbolize the infinite, the Creator as having 7 great or principal forces, attributes, powers, desires, commands or intellects. I have found each of these words used in various ancient writings, such as, the serpent with 7 heads, which are intellects or powers. The serpent covered with feathers, whose 7 commands brought the world into existence and created man to govern it. The many armed figures to which I refer undoubtedly originated in the motherland, although I first found them among the ancient Brahmins. It is a well-known fact in India that the Brahmins obtained their cosmogony, science and arts of civilization from the Nagas. The Mayas in India, first called Nagas and afterwards Danavas, came to India from the motherland many thousands of years before the Aryans became known in India. The Brahmins and the Nagas also used the 7-headed serpent to symbolize the Creator. The figure of a man instead of the figure of the serpent appears to have been used, especially for depicting special creations. I have selected a carving of one of these figures which appears in the temple caves of Ajanta near Bombay, to decipher and translate. It is especially interesting that it symbolizes the raising of the motherland above the waters, making it fruitful and productive, with man about to appear upon it. The central figure is in the form of a man, having 7 points, the numeral of creation. In this instance a higher type of symbol is used, man, instead of the serpent. It is repeatedly said that man was a special creation and endowed with powers to govern the earth. This tallies in many respects with the tableau I am about to decipher. 106 above, symbolical carving. The central figure wears the ancient sacred crown, a crown of pearls, which was assigned to the deity, showing him to be a king. He is placed in the midst of creation, therefore he is the king of creation. In the upper left hand he carries a fruit and in the right hand the royal lotus, the symbolic flower of the motherland, thus denoting that the motherland is habitable. The figure is shown standing in water. Two distinct symbols tells us this. First, the horizontal, irregular lines across his legs and the lower part of his body. Second, the single-headed serpent held in the lower right hand. Below the hand holding the serpent's head, the body of the serpent becomes a pod from which seeds are seen rolling down. These symbolize nature's germs or the cosmic eggs of the ancients. These seeds or eggs have yet to break into life. Life still lies dormant in them. In time the vital force brings these seeds into life. The first of nature's life is thus depicted as coming forth in the 107 waters. That is why the ancients call the sea the mother of life, and this ancient conception has been proved to be correct by the tails of the early Paleozoic rocks. Thus far it has been shown how nature's life appears and is created. It also shows that a habitable land exists above the waters. What is this land? At the lower left-hand corner is seen a deer in the act of leaping to the land. The deer, as we have shown, was the ancient symbol for first man. Therefore, this tableau is describing the motherland, with man about to appear upon it. The tableau is careful in differentiating between nature's creations and the special creation of man, for nature's creations are shown as seeds to be developed and brought into life, while man is shown as appearing fully developed without having to go through any evolutionary changes. It shows that man was not considered to be of nature's making. This beautiful symbol does not look much like an idol when one understands it. It is a symbol confirming our biblical teachings. Only this symbol originated tens of thousands of years before Egypt was peopled. This deciphering, by the way, is not complete, on account of the mutilated condition of the lower left hand. The mutilation makes it impossible to tell what it was supposed to depict. The seven-headed serpent. This is one of the most interesting of all the ancient symbols. Its origin was in the motherland, and it symbolizes the creator and creation and is far-reaching in its esoteric meanings. In various writings it will be found under different names, but in each instance the seven heads are referred to. I have been unable to discover its original name in the motherland, but in Hindu works I find it called both Keshar and Narayana. In the Yucatan Maya it is called Aisi Shapat, and today in Cambodia the name for it is Naga. This last appellation, however, is a modern christening, for it gives to the serpent the name of the people. The seven-headed serpent permeates all ancient writings because it symbolizes the creator and creation. Whenever and wherever we see it, we know it says, "I am the symbol of the deity, the creator." Looking at me compels you to think of him. I am the vehicle which carries your thoughts to God. At Angkor Thom in Cambodia, which is a part of ancient Burma, there are the remains of a magnificent temple that may be classed among the architectural wonders of the world. The seven-headed serpent appears in many places among these ruins, but the principal one is the approach to the temple. On either side of this approach are carved seven-headed serpents, their heads upraised from 8 to 10 feet. Their tails end at the temple walls. These two seven-headed serpents have been an enigma to the many archaeologists who have examined them, and all have placed themselves on record as saying that the builders of this temple were serpent worshippers, all except one. A lady who does not claim to be an archaeologist, Helen Churchill Candy, in her fascinating book of travel, Angkor the Magnificent, felt the heartbeat of truth about these magnificent conceptions. She writes, "It is Naga. It is like nothing else. The form is the result of centuries of legend and belief, the tangible evidence of past religion and story. It is not the fantastic creation of artist or architect, but the symbol of a demigod. His attributes, his history, are matters to dig out of inscriptions. Madame Candy is absolutely right and all the others are wrong. These serpents are symbols, but she did not carry her symbol high enough. Instead of symbolizing a demigod, they are symbols of the great creator of all worlds. In front of their necks, and also at the back, are delicately carved symbols of the motherland, which are indistinctly shown in the picture kindly supplied me by the American Weekly. I have, however, separate sketches of these symbols which I made many years ago before the French got possession of Anchor. Then it was a hard, dangerous journey to reach Anchor from the coast, and I had some quite thrilling experiences, but that is the usual thing with all explorers, it is what is bound to happen. Besides the American Weekly's picture, I am giving cuts of 2 of these carvings, with the deciphering and translations. How did the 7-headed serpent get the name of Naga in Cambodia? I can see 108 only one possible way the design came to Burma from the motherland tens of thousands of years ago, brought there by the Nagas. The Nagas were wiped out by a cataclysm, a new people occupied their land when it became habitable again. They gave the name to the serpent, calling it after the people who first brought it. Above, carvings on the great 7-headed serpent 109 above, Ganesha, the lord of the fields and crops. Ganesha, the elephant, the symbol of that attribute of the deity which cares for the fields, gardens and crops. And while we are at Anchor, let us consider another carving. There are conventional beasts there called by archaeologists lions. That they are symbolical is shown by the shape of their mouths, an elongated square, one of the symbols given to Mu. These beasts are carved in a rising position, with their faces looking towards the east, the direction of the burial ground of Mu. From end to end in Anchor one meets the constant cry from the stones, Mu, Mu, the motherland. The illustration shows Ganesha. He has been called a lot of bad names by those who did not know who he was. The Hindus, however, knew who this god was and adorned his likeness with flowers, for Ganesha was the symbol of the god who cared for the fields and crops and whose ancient name was Lord of the lands and crops. This symbol came from the land of Mu. I do not know what his name was there, but should judge it was either Rama, god of the lands, or Ramana, lord of the field and crops. The Yucatan Pipu dynasty of kings adopted him as their symbol, claiming they were the lords and owners of the land. In Yucatan, on the buildings erected during the Pipu dynasty, elephants' heads are found carved in prominent parts of the structures. In ancient times it was always usual to carve the symbol of the reigning kings on all palaces and governmental buildings. A Naga Hindu knife. I have in my possession a knife which I believe to be the oldest knife in the world and which is said to have been worn at one time by an ancient Naga king. As elsewhere stated, the Nagas were Mayas, who came to India from the motherland by way of Burma. They settled in the Deccan and eventually turned this settlement into a colonial empire known as the Naga Empire. Their capital city was on the spot where the city of Nagpur now stands. 110 It is not known when the Naga Empire ended. Legends point to about 5,000 years ago. There are innumerable Hindu records, legends and traditions. Valmiki does say, however, that it was the first Hindu colonial empire of the motherland. Above, a Naga Hindu knife. A careful examination shows that the present blade of this knife is not the blade originally fitted to the handle. The blade now attached is not of steel at all, but of hard iron. It is riveted to the handle by a hardened copper rivet. To make the blade fit the sheath, an overlying ring is put on the blade, close to the handle. Everything points to the probability that the original blade was either bronze or tempered copper and that it was thick enough at the handle to fit the sheath without the ring. The handle of the knife and the scabbard are of silver, richly carved with symbols, hieroglyphics and Maya tracings. Apart from the interest that may be taken in the age of the knife, there remains a greater interest in the hieroglyphics and symbols which are carved upon the handle and scabbard. One symbol opens up an immense field for research work. 111 The symbols which appear on the handle of the blade, front and back, are conventional tableaus, telling us who the people were that made this knife and whence they came. Fig. 1. I will first take the symbol on the front of the handle. This is a tableau both symbolical and conventional. That it refers to the motherland is plainly told by the many times the number 3 is repeated, 3 being the symbolic number of the motherland. The face depicted is a conventional face, in which 2 elongated squares form the mouth and the nose. This symbol reads Mu, the motherland. I can prove this statement because it is substantiated in the tableau. First, in the crown and plumes which adorn the head. The headdress is composed of 3 times repeated. Second, with an ancient water jar with a bud of the royal lotus on either side, thus denoting that the land stood in the midst of water and that it was Mu, the land of the royal lotus. On each side of this triple figure is a conventional plume which makes the main 3. Each of these plumes is trifurcated so as to produce 3 points. Above, symbols on the handle and sheath of the knife. The hieratic letter K is on each side of the conventional nose and is used to denote the 4 cardinal points, north, south, east and west. These are conventional eyes looking east and west in the direction of the 2 main lines of colonization, as is shown in the next tableau. The cheeks are arched to symbolize the horizon. On both horizons are 3 suns appearing as semispheres without rays. The sun appearing on the horizon without rays symbolized a colony, with rays, a colonial empire. The lower part of the figure is put there to balance the whole and give an artistic effect. At each side of the tableau is engraved a fully open royal lotus, thus emphasizing the fact that Mu, the motherland, is indicated. From the foregoing it seems evident that the knife was of the date of the Naga colonial days. 112 Fig. 2. On the back of the handle is a tableau showing Mu standing in water, with 2 fish jumping along on top of the water, one traveling east, the other west. This symbol shows that India was separated from the motherland by water and that the Nagas crossed the ocean to get to India. Their mode of travel is amusingly and very effectively told by the fish being out of water and neither flying nor swimming but hopping along the surface. Berosus, the ancient Chaldean priest and historian, spoke of the Archidmyas as being half fish and half man. The rest of the handle is carved in artistic Maya patterns. Fig. 3. The scabbard commences with 5 bands of pronounced Maya traceries. Below these bands is a tableau, a compound hieroglyphic which no doubt will be astounding to all students of archaeology. It is most amazing to me to find it in India. The central figure in this tableau is a scarab rising through rays of glory. Beneath is the symbol of earth, or moha earth, the hieratic letter M, which is shown to be productive by the conventional leaves drooping from each end of the symbol. Beneath the surface of the earth are 2 young scarabs still unborn to light. On each side of the risen scarab is the symbol of the first man, Ke, the deer, both in the act of adoration. This shows first man in adoration of the scarab beetle. What does a scarab beetle symbolize? This is the first time I have come across the scarab in India, in either writings or carvings. The scarab has hitherto been looked upon as being a purely Egyptian symbol. It was selected by the Egyptians as the symbol of the creator, who was called Khep-Hera. On the headdress of Khep-Hera, the scarab always surmounts it. Anana, the king's scribe and companion of Seti II, in one of his beautifully illustrated papyri, gives the following reason why the Egyptians selected the scarab to symbolize the creative god. The scarab rolls up little balls of mud with its feet and in these balls deposits its eggs, there to hatch out. The Egyptians think this a perfect example of the Creator rolling the world around and causing it to produce life. This italicized sentence would be startling to the modern scientist if he understood about the origin and workings of the forces, because here it is shown that the Egyptians, 3,000 or 3,500 years ago understood the origin and workings of the great forces, which I shall hereafter explain from the Hindu translations. Anana carries us back 3,500 years only, but the carvings on this knife's scabbard will carry us back to a time before the Egyptians came to Egypt. The symbol on the front of the handle tells us that this handle and scabbard were made when the Nagas were only a colony in India. Now I shall try to fix an approximate date of the Naga colony in India before it became a colonial empire. One prominent figure in the Naga or Maya Empire in India was Prince Maya. The time of Prince Maya is doubtful. Although I have come across many records about him, not a single one even estimates the date when he lived, but according to traditions, and these traditions are as plentiful as leaves on a tree, Prince Maya lived 15,000 to 20,000 years ago. In Ramayana, we find this reference to him. In olden times there was a prince of the Nagas whose name was Maya. Prince Maya was the author of the Saurya Siddhanta, the hoariest treatise on astronomy in India. Its age has been variously estimated at from 10,000 to 22,000 years. At the time of Prince Maya, the Nagas were an empire. When the handle and sheath of this knife were made, the Nagas were a colony antediting the empire. That they were only a colony is clearly shown by the suns without rays on the horizon. This proves the extreme antiquity of the handle and sheath. 113 Ancient Maya Tablet. This tablet is of fine hard sandstone. It is sculptured so as to raise the GLYPHS about 1/16 of an inch. The ground within the circle on which the GLYPHS are carved is colored a light yellow, the balance of the stone is highly glazed in blue. The GLYPHS are dark red and as highly glazed as glass. This combination of colors is often found in old Maya relics. The tablet stands about 4 inches in height. The bottom is flared so as to make a standing base on it. It was evidently an ornament to stand in some conspicuous place in the house of its owner. To me, there is a mystery connected with this tablet as it is written not in the Maya hieratic, but in the temple writings of the motherland with the Naga pattern of GLYPHS. This particular form of writing was known only to the high priesthood and a few other prominent priests, so that the value of the tablet could only be appreciated by this caste, or by the heir apparent to the throne who was initiated into the sacred mysteries. Above, an ancient Maya tablet. I shall now dissect and decipher it, and see what historical tale it has to tell. 114 Above, Key 1. The symbol of the Creator, the great ruler, the King of Kings, and was applied to Mu as the suzerain of the whole world. The Codex Cartesianus uses this application by calling Mu the great ruler. 2. This is the hieratic letter U in the motherland's alphabet, and the symbol of an abyss, a hole, a great depth. 3. This is a compound symbol being composed of the letter U with the symbol of rolling over or in over, used where the submergence of land is shown. 4. This is the symbol for a rolling movement like the swell of the ocean. It is the ancient symbol for water. 5. This is a compound symbol composed of the ancient symbol for the fires of the underneath and the symbol of a road beneath the ground. 6. This is a word, coolant. 7. This GLYPH consists of 2 words, coolant dead. 8. This GLYPH consists of a sentence, coolant dead and submerged. 9. This GLYPH is the symbol of a pillar and an earthquake. 10. The great ruler is falling into an abyss of fire. I shall now connect up these sentences in the form of a legend. The legend. Coolant, the great ruler of the earth, exists no longer. She was shaken up and down by earthquakes in various places, and the land rolled like ocean waves. Finally the pillars which were supporting her gave way and she sank into a fiery abyss. As the great ruler went down, the flames of the underneath rose and enveloped her. Then the waters rolled in over her and submerged was Kuland, the great ruler. In writing the legend I have followed strictly the writings on the tablet and am simply putting ancient language into modern, so that the layman can as thoroughly understand it as the scientist. A bronze statuette of Mu as the land where man is receiving his soul from the Creator, thus making him the special creation. Please see halftones. The figure is Mu, Ma or mother, and is shown as a woman in sleep. Her eyes being closed, she has not yet received life. The soul is depicted as a man-headed bird resting on her left shoulder, and about to enter the body. This symbolization is very interesting, as we find in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, chapters 17, 29, 85, 91, etc., the soul of man shown as a man-headed hawk. The Egyptian is from 2 to 5,000 years later date. The age of this bronze would somewhat depend on where it was made. It was either in the motherland itself or in the Uyghur colonial empire. As an object of art in its beauty and perfection of workmanship, it compares favorably with the finest and most delicate compositions of today. 115. I know its history perfectly, but do not feel warranted in stating more about it than to say where it came from and how it reached America. After lying many years, dust-covered, in a garret, it now reposes in a safe deposit vault. During a period of the last century there was considerable disturbance in China, with much looting of palaces and temples. The reader can imagine where the bronze came from. With other antiques of great value, it was brought on board an American warship lying in the harbor and sold to an officer of that ship. The antiques are in the families of his descendants, who only recently became aware of their extreme value. The great monolith at Tiahuanaco, Peru. This immense stone has been one of the great wonders and enigmas to all archaeologists who have ever looked upon it or its picture. To the archaeologist it is one of the wonders of the world. Perched up on the shores of Lake Titicaca, 13,500 feet above the level of the Pacific Ocean, it rests as a part of a ruin of a temple. Much has been written about this stone, and the consensus of opinion among the various writers is, if it could only be deciphered and read, what a wonderful tale it might possibly tell about the ancient past. This stone does tell a wonderful tale, for it takes its readers back 16,000 years, when Mu, the motherland, still held her proud sway throughout the earth, before she sank into that fiery abyss to be mourned by mankind for many thousands of years. It tells about the times when the first settlements were being made in Egypt on the Nile Delta under the dawn of Egyptian history. At the time the temple was built with its magnificently carved stones, the Andes Mountains did not exist, they had not yet been thrown up through the plains of western South America. It was the raising of these mountains that destroyed the country, most of the people and this temple, in doing which this great monolith was fractured into two pieces. Above, the great monolith at Tiahuanaco, many writers, I find, assign this stone to the work of the Incas. The Incas did not come to Peru for about 15,000 years after this temple was built. When the Incas, Quiches, arrived in Peru, the Andes Mountains had been in existence many thousands of years. It is a wonderful old stone, for although a hieratic alphabet had been used for a long time, not a letter appears on it. This carving follows along the lines of the first forms of writings ever used, a 116 combination of symbols forming a picture, the picture forming a writing. It is most unusual to find a carving of this date without hieratic writings forming a part of it, yet, without these writings the picture is as easy to read as a present-day printed book. All that is needed is a knowledge of the meaning of symbols. The excellence of this stone shows great mechanical skill and artistry. Now, with the aid of the symbols of the motherland and those specially used in her colonial empires, I shall decipher it and read it to you. On looking at the picture of the carving, the most prominent object which strikes the eye is a conventional head of a human being, and the most striking point of this head is the number of times the numeral 3 is woven into it. 3, as previously stated, was the numeral assigned to mu. I shall now dissect the head. It consists of 3 superimposed layers forming an escutcheon, the uppermost of which is sculptured so as to represent the human face. Above are 3 feathers forming a plume, and beneath a triple throne, which the figure surmounts. On each cheek there are 3 dots. The breastplate, if it can be so called, contains 3 oblong squares, which is one of the symbols for mu, the geometrical and alphabetical symbol. The scepter at its end is adorned with 3 macaws' heads. The shape of the mouth is also conventional, an oblong square. Here 9 times it says mu. The head is surrounded by rays divided into groups of 4. This makes a complete circle of rays, and is a part of the symbol reading, mu, the empire of the Sunday. The termination of each ray is, circle with dot in center, Ahau King of Kings, thus saying, the emperor of the empire of the sun was the king over all of the earthly kings. The macaws' heads at the end of the scepter are a colonial symbol, the totem of Queen Mu of Mayax, and, being attached to the scepter, designate that Mayax was a vassal state or colonial empire. On the rays of the upper angles are leopards' heads, also appearing on each side of the escutcheon. The leopard was the totem of Prince Ko, the brother-husband of Queen Mu. At the lower angles are serpents' heads, the symbol of the Kan dynasty. Thus the central figure tells us that Queen Mu with her husband Ko of the Kan family are reigning in Mayax, and that Mayax was one of Mu's colonial empires. On the lower band are sculptured 17 small heads, over each head and on either side are the symbols for land. The definite meaning of this I cannot state. It may mean that Mu has 17 colonies, again this may not be the actual meaning. Above this band are 3 bands of winged figures. Those in the middle row have macaw heads, indicating their allegiance to Queen Mu. The figures in the other 2 rows have human heads, but wear on their crowns Queen Mu's totem, showing that they recognize her as their sovereign. All these figures are ornamented with 12 serpents, symbolizing the 12 Maya dynasties who ruled over Mayax. The whole picture combined shows that the inhabitants of this land, where this temple was built, were vassals to or a sub-colony of Mayax at the time Queen Mu and her husband Ko were reigning in Mayax. Queen Mu visited the Maya colony at Sals on the Nile Delta during the 1st century of its existence and there met Thoth, its founder, according to the Trono manuscript. The Nile colony was started 16,000 years ago, therefore this great monolith of Tiahuanaco was carved just 16,000 years ago. Carved stone at Anuradhapura, Ceylon. On account of the shape of this stone, which is a half-sphere, it has been called by archaeologists who have visited Anuradhapura, the Anuradhapura moonstone. There are several of them and they are placed at the foot of the steps leading into the temple. That this is a symbolical stone, telling who the Sinhalese were and whence and how they came to Ceylon, has been overlooked by archaeologists, yet the writings are quite plain and distinct. 117 The center of the stone is carved as a conventional but elaborate lotus in full bloom. This, of course, is the symbol of the motherland, the land of Mu. It was adopted as such, so Oriental traditions say, because it was the first flower to adorn the earth's surface. There is every reason for believing that these traditions told the truth and that the lotus was the first flower to appear on earth. Above, one of the symbolic stones, Anuradhapura, Ceylon, called by archaeologists moonstones. Carved on the stone is a series of half circles, one of the symbols of a colony of the motherland. On account of the bad condition of the outside band beyond the animals, I am unable to say whether it was an ordinary colony or a colonial empire. Beyond the lotus is an ornamental band. This has no symbolical significance, unless it symbolizes water. It is also too indistinct to warrant any definite conclusions. The next band consists of a procession of ducks, indicating the manner in which the colonists came to Ceylon. Like ducks, they came on the surface of the water, that is, they came in their boats. Outside of the procession of ducks is a band which, without doubt, is ornamental only, carved there as an artistic dividing line between the procession of ducks and a procession of animals. This procession of animals is divided into sets of 3, the symbolic numeral of the motherland. Freely read, the symbols on this stone say, these people who came to Ceylon came there from a colony of Mu, in their boats, the road being across the ocean, and their forefathers came to that colony from the motherland. Anuradhapura was not an old city, about 2,200 years only, but before it was built Ceylon had been occupied by a warlike race for at least 10,000 years, as recorded by Valmiki, the Hindu sage and historian. 118 Chapter 10 North America's place among the ancient civilizations. Two of the most interesting questions of the day, to both scientist and layman, are these: where did man first appear upon the earth? At what date did he appear? How far back? The first of these questions I can answer and give all reasonable proofs, which consist of written documents, inscriptions on historic ruins, traditions, and geological phenomena. The second question cannot now be answered, and probably never will be, because the records and proofs which were once written now lie in the bed of one of our deepest oceans. There is a possibility, however, that in unearthing the ruins of ancient Hindu Rishi city temples, there may be found complete copies of the 7 sacred inspired writings of Mu. The 7th writing, or chapter, tells the tale and gives the history of man from his advent upon earth. We have a biblical statement that says man first appeared on earth in the Garden of Eden, but where the Garden of Eden was no two authorities agree. I maintain that the biblical Garden of Eden was the Egyptian lands of the West, the Mayas' land of Kui, and the Hindus' motherland. The hierarchical name for all of these was the land of Mu. Now I shall follow ancient man around the world and, by the written records he has left behind in every country, show beyond all peradventure the geographical position of Mu. I shall make the start from the United States of North America, because North America and Eastern Asia were the 2 countries where man made his first settlements away from the motherland. In their excitement over the discovery of a few old human bones, such as the Neanderthal, Piltdown, and Heidelberg man, scientists, in both Europe and America, have completely ignored the remains of ancient man in North America. That the European remains were those of idiots and degenerates is obvious from the abnormal shapes of their skulls. Doubtless they were outcasts from civilized communities. From Valmiki, Druidical works, the Popol Vuh and other ancient writings we learn that such characters were driven into the forests, there to live and die like the beasts. It would appear from many ancient writings that the usual method of disposing of bodies was by cremation, consequently there remained no trace of those whose bones had been consumed by fire. The mere bones of man do not show the degree of civilization which he has attained, or the manner in which he lived, but his works do. The remains of ancient man's bones found in North America are few, but his works are many. All of the scientists who became excited over the discovery of ancient bones in Europe agree that they are of the Pleistocene time, or subsequent to the geological glacial period. North Americans were highly civilized, experts in the arts and sciences, tens of thousands of years before these idiots and degenerates of Europe existed. A scientific boom was given to Egypt, by way of change, through the assertion that Egypt was the mother of civilization, whereas there are numerous ancient documents telling us that the soil of Egypt was first trod by colonists from America and India, and that these colonists brought the learning and civilization of the motherland with them. Many of these documents were written by the ancient Egyptians themselves. As Schliemann has shown, the great civilization of Egypt declined with the loss of support furnished by the motherland. The evolution theory has now a firm hold on our scientists, an idea which is impossible and untenable in the face of the sacred and inspired writings of Mu. These writings tell us what life is, how it originated and the forces which govern it. Although written more than 50,000 years ago, the writings inform us as to the nature of the force which our scientists call the electron, its origin, how it works, what it does and its final disposition. 119 There are the remains of highly civilized men in North America which date far back into the Tertiary era and antedate the geological glacial period tens of thousands of years. The sacred mysteries of Egypt tell us what the so-called glacial period was, what caused it, and give a scientific description of everything concerning it. Many of the North American remains of man date back to a time before our great western mountain ranges raised their imposing heads above the level of the plains. In our western states there are traceable 4 civilizations of human beings who occupied the land before the cliff dwellers and the present Red Indians. It is quite possible that the actual cliff dwellers and the Red Indians may be races that have descended from remnants that were saved during the raising of the mountains. The 4 civilizations are shown by their different forms of writings and the remains of their houses. These writings are on boulders and cliffs and give to us an imperishable history of the race that inscribed them. True, it is a fragmentary history, but it is sufficient to tell us whence they came, how they came, and of their religion and accomplishments. The keys to these writings come from the motherland and they consist of a hieratic alphabet and a system of symbols or picture writing. The pictures form an alphabet of words instead of letters, and they are easy to read with the aid of the keys and a knowledge of the language in which they are written. Following are a few of the most prominent of the ancient civilizations in North America. Oregon. In Oregon, at a place called Fossil Lake, the remains of a very ancient civilization have been unearthed. Fossil Lake is the dried-out bed of what was once an ancient sheet of water. From the remains of the prehistoric animals found there, it has been proved that the lake existed in the Mesozoic age. Fossil Lake stands in the midst of the Great Oregon Desert, once a fertile plain but made waterless by the raising of the mountains, which diverted the surface water. Around the dried-up bed of the lake the fossils of ancient animals have been discovered. In the lower strata the bones of dinosaurs and other Mesozoic animals have been found, in the upper, the bones of mastodons and other mammal life of the Pleistocene time. Among the bones of the mastodons were arrow and spear heads made of volcanic glass. Nevada. Some of the most valuable data relating to ancient man in North America have been uncovered through the work of archaeologists in this state. Hundreds, yes, thousands, of records have been found on the rocks and cliffs of our western states, including symbols, hieratic letters and vignettes. I have selected a few from Nevada, as much as I can give in this curtailed work. Symbol. This is one of the symbols of Mu, the empire of the sun. A sun in mid-heaven surrounded with rays. B. This is the symbol for the rising sun, and was so used by all ancient peoples. C. This is the symbol of the sun at its meridian commonly used by all ancient peoples. D. This is the sun shown as gone down beyond the horizon, set. Usually it is depicted as a plain circle without rays. In this case it is a black disk, which says it is referring to something that has forever passed away from the sun's rays. This symbolizes Mu forever in darkness. Mu's name is given by her numeral 3, placed on the top of the black disk. This is a vignette saying that Mu lies across the ocean in the direction of the setting sun. 120 The serpent is Khan, symbolic of the ocean Kanab, the great waters. The semicircle above the serpent is a picture of the western horizon. Here again Mu's name is given by her symbolic numeral 3. She is shown by 3 feathers on the horizon. G1. This is a hieroglyphic reading Ulamil, the Empire of Dot. This is the central figure on the royal escutcheon of Mu. H1. This is a bud of a lotus, the royal and sacred flower of the motherland. G2. A single-headed, unadorned serpent, the symbol of the waters among all ancient peoples. H2. Another symbol used for water, in place of the serpent. The ancients sometimes used a plain cross instead of the usual symbol, the four-sided square. Both show 4 cardinal points. 121 Above, symbols found among cliff dwellers' writings K. This is the first letter in the hieratic alphabet of the motherland, pronounced A. It is also the numeral 1, pronounced Han. Its meaning was extended to cover King Ahau, the King of Kings. L. This is the letter N in the hieratic alphabet. M. This is the symbol for an abyss, a valley or hole. N. This is the letter X in the hieratic alphabet. O. This is the letter U in the hieratic alphabet, reversed. 122 pages might be written about this symbol of the serpent and the tree. It came into existence, however, after the submersion of Mu. Q. This symbol has both plain and esoteric meanings. It symbolizes creation, also the numeral 9. This is an Uyghur religious symbol. S. This is the Uyghur hieratic letter HT. Is this a feather or shrub? I don't know. U. This is the ancient symbol for 100. V. This is a symbol for mountains, not very old. W. This is an interesting symbol, as it is a map of the western coastline of North, Central and South America. X. This picture has no symbolical significance. Such hands are found painted on cave walls throughout the world. Y. This cross reads and refers to the active and passive elements in nature. It also has an esoteric meaning. Z. I doubt if this symbol means anything beyond artistic effect. AA. This is the picture of a skin of an animal. BB. Similar heads are found in Egypt and elsewhere. The horns are adorned, showing that the animal is intended for some function or ceremony. It is not a very ancient symbol. CC. A 3-pointed figure symbolizing multitudes. It is generally found with the points pointing downwards. DD. A guidepost telling the traveler the direction and length of his journey. These cliff writings prove that the writers came from the motherland and that they were intimately connected with the Mayas of Mexico and Central America, as their language is a branch of the Maya. Painting. Grapevine Canyon, Nevada. I is the ground plan of a temple. 2 is the symbol for submersion. Having gone down with myriads of inhabitants. 3 is the symbol for the sun having set forever on the land or lands submerged, and includes the sunset, the life cross and submersion. The details in this ground plan, I say, this temple is erected to the memory of Mu, the motherland of man, which has been submerged with myriads of souls. The central figure, 4, represents a shrine or holy of holies. Within this shrine is M reversed M, Mu, motherland, showing to whom it is dedicated and that she is no more. She is dead. On either side of the central figure are 3 Taurs T, the symbol of resurrection. This is a common way of referring to the motherland all over the world. 123 On the moonstones of Anuradhapura, Ceylon, the symbolical animals are in groups of 3. On the great monolith of Tiahuanaco, Peru, the thrones are in groups of 3. On the heads of the figures in Central America are 3 crowns, and so on, ad infinitum. The 3 divisions about the shrine represent the 3 rooms, where the devotee receives his 3 degrees in religious knowledge. This is the usual construction of ancient temples. The 3 rooms are confirmed by the treble figure, 5, at the entrance. This is the shape of the ends of all the rooms, representing heaven and earth. In the room itself the degree is shown by the number of stars within the triangle. Above, ground plan of temple at Grapevine Canyon, Nevada. Another writing in Grapevine Canyon, Nevada. At the right of this temple is the GLYPH, 2. This is a compound symbol and reads land or lands submerged. 20 is a symbol meaning multitudes. Thus the GLYPH shows multitudes of souls submerged. At the left is another compound symbol, 3, A is the sun, B lands submerged. Translated, it reads, the sun shines no more on these lands which are submerged. Therefore, the whole tableau says, 124 mu, with myriads of souls, has been submerged. The sun shines no more upon her. She is in darkness. She is dead. The second stone is adjacent to the previous one. It represents a sacrificial scene, I the animal on the altar. 2 the fires to consume it. 3 the symbol of submerged mu. I have included this drawing to corroborate the previous one and furnish additional proof that the temple was dedicated to Mu and that Mu had been submerged. There were no burnt sacrifices previous to the destruction of the motherland. Burnt sacrifices were introduced as a religious ceremony, to commemorate Mu and her people being consumed by fire as she sank into the fiery abyss. Gold Gulch, Beatty, Nevada. This rock is one of nature's freaks that was utilized by man many thousands of years ago as a guide to travelers, and a commemorative monument to Mu. Roughly, the stone resembles the squat and bent figure of a man in a posture of grief and mourning. He is heavily cloaked in the ancient Manchu style, with arms folded across the knees. On the top is a weather-worn stone, which represents the head of the figure. In place of eyes are pecked and painted 2 symbols, both very pronounced as to meaning. It reads, Kai Pezi, which, translated, means, a mouth opened, fires came forth with vapors, the land gave way and went down. 2 a.m. This is the escutcheon of the Empire of the Sun, the land of Mu. A sun with 8 rays. Instead of the center being a symbol reading, the Empire of Dash, this has in its place, 2 How, the king, the great ruler. Freely read, the writings on this face say, a mouth opened, volcanic fires and vapors came forth, the land gave way, and Mu, the great ruler, the Empire of the Sun, sank into that abyss of fire. On the left arm of the figure, the first symbol is, 3, the Ha, which, translated, reads, toward water or in the direction of water. From the main symbol are shown streams joining each other. The characters on this picture are all Uyghur. These people may have been Mongols. This is a guidepost, nothing more, telling the way to water. It is a crudely drawn ancient, conventional face looking in the direction of water. The first water to be found in this vicinity, by the way, is a spring, pond or lake, and farther on, a river. The ground is intersected with trails, and the figure shows which road to take to the pond or spring. The first settlers in the United States made their settlements along the southwestern states. These settlements were wiped out by cataclysms at the same time that contemporary settlements in Mexico were also destroyed. These were of a very early date, probably during Pliocene times. 125 above Colorado River and tributaries, the gateway of the cliff dwellers into the United States. A second civilization, and probably a third, followed them. These were destroyed by cataclysms and by the raising of the great ranges of mountains. The raising of these mountains, by the way, made deserts of many fertile lands in Colorado, Arizona and Nevada. The cliff dwellers were the last colonizers to arrive from the land of Mu. When the first settlements were made in the southwestern states, it was before the mountains were raised. When the cliff dwellers entered America, the mountains probably had been raised, for we find their houses in the cliffs of the mountains. The cliff dwellers spoke the Yucatan Maya language, as is shown by their use of the Maya hieratic alphabet, which I have found in Nevada. One would judge, from the points where we find the remains of the cliff dwellers in Colorado, that the mouth of the Colorado River was their port of entry into America. It is quite apparent that, after reaching their objective point from the motherland, the mouth of the Colorado River, they proceeded to work up the river and inland. From remains of them found in various states, it is shown that they did not confine themselves to the main river, but worked out on all of its branches and smaller tributaries, some even going beyond the water route by trails on land, such as the Old Zuni Trail. Generally, however, they seemed to choose water routes in preference to land routes. 126 working inland from the Colorado River's mouth, they would first pass through Arizona, which state is full of their remains. Their old homes and remains show that they worked out on the Gila, Little Colorado and Grand Rivers. In New Mexico their remains are also abundant. After passing through Arizona, up the Colorado River, they wound their way into Utah. Utah is rich in their remains. Branches of the Colorado continue into Nevada and Wyoming, and in both states there are remains of these ancient people. Leaving the main river and working out on the branches, the Grand, San Juan, White and Yampa rivers, the cliff dwellers would, naturally, enter Colorado, a state which is extremely rich in their remains. Basing calculations on these not only possible but probable routes, the great figures pecked and painted on the rocks, in peculiar positions, with extraordinary hands and feet, were unquestionably guideposts, a dumb language, guiding and telling the traveler about the journey ahead of him. I know this is true, because I have deciphered and translated some of them. All the regions surrounding the Colorado River are literally filled with the works of the old cliff dwellers. These remains consist of cliff houses, rock paintings, rock writings and various utensils and instruments. The fact that these works are only found in the vicinity of the Colorado River and its tributaries is the strongest sort of evidence that the Colorado River was the gateway through which the cliff dwellers entered America, and possibly their predecessors as well. When the cliff dwellers came to America is problematical. There is no positive evidence, nor, in fact, anything to give us any intimation. They or their ancestors, however, were here before the mountains were raised, which would fix their date at 12,500 years ago. Arizona Dr. Walter Huff, of the Smithsonian Institution, made an examination of the petrified forests of Arizona and reported that he had found the remains of 4 distinct peoples there. This find corresponds with my own discoveries in our western and southwestern states, as well as in Mexico. 3 of Huff's civilizations existed before the mountains were raised. The accompanying illustration is a copy of an ancient rock picture found in the Havasupai Canyon, Arizona. It is more than 12,000 years old and shows that man was living in Arizona contemporaneously with the mastodon. New Mexico. The ancient history of New Mexico is the ancient history of the Pueblo Indians, whose past constitutes one of the most fascinating tales ever told about the ancient men of North America. The Pueblo Indians, when they first came to America, were a very highly civilized and enlightened people. Their traditions and the data found among them prove the fact. They have the oldest records and traditions of any North Americans who came to this continent from the motherland. In our western and southwestern states are many ancient ruined cities and structures, rock pictures, rock writings, pottery and traditions. Our famous scientists and archaeologists have been particularly bashful about telling us anything about the people who occupied this land before the present inhabitants. The most they tell us is that these writings are from 3,000 to 5,000 years old. It is from the Hopi and Zuni pueblos that the most information is to be obtained. To me, these tribes are the most interesting of all the North American Indians living today. Possibly this is because I know them better than any of the others. Their connection with the motherland is perfectly established, and their traditions also tell us that they originally came to America from Mu. All their religious inspirations are traceable back to the first religion of man, and their sacred symbols are virtually those of Mu. I have a Pueblo ceremonial blanket, the ornamentations of which are sacred symbols derived from the motherland. Their traditions are interesting and far-reaching. A fascinating tradition of theirs is about the creation of the first man and woman, the Adam and Eve of the Bible. It is most valuable for the reason that the language of the motherland is found in the esoteric meanings of some of the words. 127 The Zunis and the Hopis have two special gods who are supposed to shape the destinies of mankind. These gods are held sacred, but are not worshipped. In other words, they are comparable to our saints. The names of these two gods are Ahi-Inta and Matsalama. These were the first children of the god of the sun. This sentence bears careful analysis. The Hopi Indians have differentiated between the sun, the collective symbol of God, and God himself. They point out that the first man and the first woman were the children of God himself and not the children of his symbol, the sun. I have found in ancient writings, especially in those of the Hindus and Egyptians, passages where the sun is called the father of life, and the waters, the mother of life, but in each instance they are speaking about nature's products and not the special creation called man. They also speak of the sun's forces working on the earth's affinitive forces. The Hopi Indians hold that man and woman were the children of God, the great God who rules the sun, therefore, they are not the offspring of nature. A further corroboration lies in the esoteric meanings of the names of man and woman. Their names are composed of vocables of the mother tongue, and, like all ancient religious writings, have a hidden meaning. For instance, Ahi-Inta is made up of the motherland words Ahi-Inta, and Matsalama of Matsilama. Conjoined, they read, God created the first man and the first woman to occupy the earth. These first children of God were the parents of all mankind. The language of the Pueblo Indians contains, as I have pointed out, many words of the mother tongue and many others find their roots in the same source. Another legend reads as follows: their forefathers came to America in their ships from across the sea in the direction of the setting sun. Thus it is shown that they came to America from the west, in ships, not over the much abused and imposed on Bering Land Bridge. When the Pueblos first came to America they were in a highly civilized state, which is corroborated by their wonderful knowledge of geology, their cultivated language, and their use of the sacred symbols of the motherland. A peculiar coincidence that I discovered among the Pueblo Indians was this: they had 7 sacred cities of Cibola. This is a pure copy of the motherland and a custom that prevailed among her colonial empires. For instance, the motherland had 7 sacred cities of religion and the sciences, Atlantis had the same, and India had her 7 rishi, or sacred, cities. Lieutenant Gushing lived among the Hopi Indians for a long time while he translated what has been called the Zuni myths, which are myths only because the people into whose hands they have passed have failed to understand them. These Pueblo traditions have been handed down orally from father to son for thousands of years, but a tradition is actual history, not a myth. I shall take some extracts from Lieutenant Cushing's translations, which, added to my own personal knowledge of the Pueblos, make interesting reading. For example, a Zuni tradition says, once the earth was covered with water, no land appeared anywhere. Is this a myth? Not at all, for it has been corroborated by the sacred writings of the motherland and by geology. Another Zuni tradition says, just before man appeared upon the earth, the ground was so soft and watery man could not have walked upon it, his feet would sink into the ground, therefore he could not live upon it. A description of what sort of footwear a man must have had to enable him to pass over the soft, watery ground without sinking into it, is very amusing. Although geological works do not mention this kind of ground as having been in the world at any time, yet that such was the case is clearly enough shown by the shape and character of the feet of the early 128 tertiary animals, that had long, spreading toes like the feet of our present-day wading birds frequenting the muddy shores of rivers, ponds and lakes. Another so-called Zuni myth, the ancient Zunis, thousands upon thousands of years ago, had a perfect knowledge of the great reptilian monstrosities that frequented the earth from the Carboniferous age down to the end of the Cretaceous period. The traditions say, they were monsters and animals of prey, they were provided with claws and terrible teeth. A mountain lion is but a mole in comparison to them. Then those above said to these animals, Ye shall all be changed into stone, that ye be not evil to men, but that ye may be a great good to them. Thus have we changed ye into everlasting stone. Thus was the surface of the earth hardened and many of all sorts of beasts turned into stone. Thus, too, it happens that we find them throughout the world. Their forms are sometimes large, in shape, like themselves. Sometimes they are shriveled and distorted out of shape, and we often see among the rocks many beasts that no longer live, which show us that all was different in the days of the new. I think Cushing hardly caught the exact translations in the words I have italicized. My changes, however, in no way alter the meanings. The foregoing has been passed along as another Zuni myth. Yet, in order to prove that it is not a myth, one has only to stroll through any of our museums to see on every side the truth of the Zuni tradition. Go to the Museum of Natural History in New York and look at the fossil of the crested trichodont, or visit the United States National Museum at Washington and gaze at the complete and perfect skeleton of the Jurassic dinosaur, Stegosaurus. Crushed and flattened. There may be readers who will say that these have nothing to do with the Pueblos and that they do not prove the tradition not to be a myth. For the benefit of such doubters, let us consider the Havasupai Canyon in Arizona. There, drawn and carved on a rock, is a picture of the most terrible carnivorous dinosaur that ever existed on Earth, the gruesome Tyrannosaurus of the late Cretaceous period. This picture probably was drawn more than 12,000 years ago. It is only within the last 100 years that this form of reptile was known to our scientists. Cuvier found a part of a skeleton and out of it made a reproduction, a great lizard walking on all four legs. I think I am correct in saying that it is actually only within the last 50 years that the true form of the Tyrannosaurus became known, although it had been faithfully depicted in rock drawings by ancient man thousands of years ago. The Zunis also have various traditions about the flood. I quote the tradition about this catastrophe, as published by G. W. James, in the long ago. The Zunis were very wicked, and in spite of the continued warnings of those above, they persisted in their evil doings until the Shadow People determined to destroy them from the face of the earth. Accordingly, the two great water sources of the world were opened, the reservoir of the above from which all rains descend, and the reservoir of the below from which all springs, creeks and rivers receive their flow. The very plugs were withdrawn and the rain poured down and the floods arose, until the Zunis knew the wrath of the gods was falling upon them. Hastily they fled to the summit of Tayo al-La'eni, Thunder Mountain, where the younger ones of the wicked and profane laughed at the fears of the others, and openly scoffed at the idea that even the floods of heaven and of the underworld beneath could ever rise so high as to reach them. But slowly the water arose, higher and higher it came, until even the scoffers were silenced, and dumb dread filled their souls. In vain the priests of the various brotherhoods danced, sang, prayed and made big smoke, made medicine and offered gifts. The anger of those above would not be turned away. At last the chief of the priests went away to a quiet part of the mountain summit, where he could meditate and pray and more especially intercede for the people. He finally came back and said that those above could have their anger turned away from them only in one way. The choicest of the young men and the fairest and sweetest of the young maidens must be sacrificed, and then, 129 with appropriate ceremonies be flung into the waters. Thus could the wrath of the gods be appeased and their anger turned away. Sadly the people listened and then discussed as to who should be offered as the needful sacrifice. A youth was found as handsome as a young god, athletic, healthful, radiant, fine-featured and beloved by all. Then while no one dared to whisper it, the thought went through the minds of all that the only maiden worthy was the beloved and only daughter of their revered cacique. When he looked up to see whom the people had chosen, there was no maiden there. Tears sprang into his eyes. Calling his sweet daughter to him, he said a few words to which she reverently bowed her head. Taking her stand beside the youth, those present knew that the sacrifice would be complete. Carefully robing them both in their finest ceremonial costumes, placing suitable decorations in their hair, around their arms, and in their hands, the young pair were made ready. Then, slowly and quietly, but increasing in volume and agony, the death wail was sung, after which the cacique blessed them both, and, invoking the pardon of those above, to be gained at so great a cost, he flung them headlong into the seething waters. It was done not a moment too soon, for already the throng were standing on a small piece of high land left on the mesa top with the waters completely surrounding them. In less than an hour the waters had gained their height and began to subside. Days and weeks passed, however, before the valley was dry and the chastened people could return to their homes. Not long after this, one of the youths who had been foremost in wickedness happened to look up towards Tayo Lane and there saw two figures standing out clear and plain on the mesa top. Calling to his people, they were soon gazing in wonderment and awe at the sight, knowing that those above had given this to them as a sign. This was confirmed when the cacique solemnly assured them that these were the heavenly made images of their loved ones given as a sacrifice. The outer, larger one, was the youth, and the inner and smaller one was the maiden. As a matter of fact, there are 6 of these shafts on Thunder Mountain, 2 large ones and 4 small ones. James, after thanking his Zuni narrator, pointed out the fact to him, whereupon the Zuni replied, "Ah." The youth and the maiden cried out to those above that they were lonesome, so the gods married them, and by 4 children came, 2 boys and 2 girls, to make them happy. In the tradition it will be noted that the word cacique is used to designate the head or principal of the tribe. Cacique is a Quiche Maya word, meaning the principal head. In Peru, the Quiches, who originally came there from Central America, are now known as Quichuas, and their word for principal or head is cacique. It is the same in Venezuela among the descendants of the Caramayas from Central America. The Zuni tradition of the flood is a particularly valuable piece of geological information because it proves that the waters of the last magnetic cataclysm extended far beyond the geological drift line in America. Various Pueblo traditions, their language, their sacred symbols and other evidences prove that the Pueblo Indians originally came to America from Mu. As I have already shown, Mu was submerged some 12,000 years ago. Therefore, as these Pueblo Indians came directly from Mu, then they must have been in America at least 12,000 years. The Pueblos have many of the Quiche Maya words in their language, in addition to which many of their original conceptions are identical with those of the Quiches, showing that either in the motherland, or on their first arrival in America, they were geographically in close proximity. The Pueblos have been little influenced, if at all, by the white people of today, and live now as their ancestors did for many centuries, preserving with great care not only the purity of their language, which they teach their children to speak correctly, but also their customs, traditions and ancient rites and ceremonies. 130 Another connection with the Quiche Mayas and the far distant past is their prominent symbol, the bearded serpent Quetzalcoatl, found principally in the Pajarito Park region. In confirmation of the foregoing, Professor E. L. Hewitt, of the Las Vegas University, reports that he has found in the homes of an ancient people fossil remains of the mastodon and saber-toothed tiger, also utensils made out of live, not fossil ivory, thus corroborating the Havasupai-Canyon picture. Colorado Desert. In the Colorado Desert there are some famous remains of a great past civilization. These remains have been a puzzle to scientists, but they merely substantiate the old tale of ancient man and his original habitat. The Colorado Desert, like the Oregon and most other deserts, was once fertile land made waterless by the raising of the mountains. It is conclusively proved, however, that the people who lived where the Colorado Desert now stands lived there before the western mountain ranges were raised. Nebraska Professor R. W. Gilder, of Omaha, Nebraska, has made one of the most remarkable and valuable archaeological discoveries ever made in any part of the world. His discovery shows uncontrovertibly that man was living in North America, in a highly civilized state, back in the Tertiary era. Gilder has discovered a civilization that was wiped out by the waters of the last magnetic cataclysm, which was the biblical flood and the geological glacial period. Gilder reports that the familiar buffalo wallows of the West were never made by buffaloes, they are, instead, the entrances to ruins of underground dwellings, in which, thousands of years ago, lived a race which has vanished from the earth. There is no indication of who the people were or how they were wiped out. Among the ruins of these long-filled burrows Gilder has found various works of art of the vanished race. Fig. I is a glazed clay pipe, see halftones. Fig. 2 is a fish hook made of bone. Fig. 3 is a clay face with prominently sloping eyes. Fig. 4 is a small pink soapstone head. Gilder says of it, the pink head is Egyptian in every feature. It is delicately carved and highly polished. It is Egyptian in headdress, having even the rectangular earguards worn by the Egyptians. It is more than Egyptian, it resembles the face of Ramses II himself, if the marble busts in Oriental museums today are images of the Egyptian king. Fig. 5 is an ornament made of shell. Fig. 6 is a comb made of elk horn. The floors of these underground burrows are strewn with charred sticks, reeds, coarse grasses and corncobs. In the floor of every cave is found a cache, where most of the domestic utensils and other valuables were kept hidden. Sometimes there are several in the same cave. The mouths of the caches are always found plugged with layers of burnt clay. On top of this is a layer of ashes. Beneath all, the cavity widens like a jug or bottle, often the size of a hogshead. These artificial caves were filled in with the soil and drift torn up by the waves of the cataclysm as they rolled down over the plains. In time this filling packed and left a hollow at the entrance, which has been called a buffalo wallow. Gilda's civilization was wiped out by the last magnetic cataclysm. Therefore, it was a tertiary-era civilization. Kentucky. In Kentucky are the remains of a civilization that was contemporaneous with Gilda's Nebraska civilization. At Blue Lick Springs, several years ago, an excavation was being made. 12 feet below the surface of the ground, the workmen came across the bones of a mastodon. Farther down, they found a 131 stratum of gravel, and underneath the gravel, a stone pavement. The stones forming this pavement had been quarried. Their upper surfaces had been cut and dressed, while their lower sides were in the rough. The mastodon in this excavation belonged to the Pleistocene period, as it lay above the gravel. The gravel was formed by the waters of the last magnetic cataclysm, and the stone pavement, being below the gravel, shows that this civilization, like Gilda's, was a tertiary-era civilization. George W. Rank, the Kentucky historian, in his History of Lexington, wrote, "The city now known as Lexington, Kentucky, is built of the dust of a dead metropolis of a lost race, of whose name, and language, and history not a vestige is left." Even the bare fact of the existence of such a city, and such a people, on the site of the present Lexington, would never have been known but for the rapidly decaying remnants of ruins found by early pioneers and adventurers to the Elkhorn lands. But that these remains of a great city and a mighty people did exist, there can be not the shadow of a doubt. Who, then, were these mysterious beings? From whence did they come? What were the forms of their religion and government? These are questions that will probably never be solved by mortal man, but that they lived and flourished centuries before the Indian, who can doubt? Here they erected their cyclopean temples and cities, with no vision of the red men who would come after them, and chase the deer and the buffalo over their leveled and grass-covered walls. Here they lived, and labored, and died, before Columbus had planted the standard of old Spain upon the shores of a new world, while Gaul, and Britain, and Germany were occupied by roving tribes of barbarians, and, it may be, long before Imperial Rome had reached the height of her glory and splendor. But they had no literature, and when they died they were utterly forgotten. They may have been a great people, but it is all the same to those who came if they were or not, for their greatness was never recorded. They trusted in the mighty works of their hands, and now, indeed, are they a dead nation and a lost race. True, the mighty works of their hands, so far as buildings are concerned, are one with Nineveh and Tyre, but their hands left other records upon the imperishable rocks, and it is by these records we may identify them as colonizers from Mu, the motherland. Therefore, by the foregoing facts that I have recorded about discoveries in North America, we have positive proofs that the whole of western North America was peopled by highly civilized races during the latter part of the Tertiary era and before the geological glacial period. Hundreds of rock writings, confirmed by many legends, also tell us that these first civilizations of North America came from a country called Mu, and that Mu lay to the west of America, beyond the horizon of the Great Water. This is positive because the Nebraskan and Kentucky civilizations have now been shown to have existed during the Pliocene period. Oregon, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Arizona and New Mexico show us civilizations that existed before the mountains were raised. As these civilizations antedated the mountains, they also went back into the Tertiary period. How far back into the Tertiary era they went is not known, as no date has so far come to light to tell us. It remains an open question. 132 above, Cliff Dweller's guideposts in 3 forms of writing. Fig. I. Arizona. Directions about an overland trail. Fig. 2. New Mexico. Directions, land trail. Fig. 3. Utah. Directions, land and water route to a settlement. Not the same people as either I or to those ancient dwellers in our western states known as cliff dwellers were represented by several distinct tribes, and it is possible that, instead of being merely tribes, they were distinct nationalities. I surmise this from their rock writings and rock paintings, which show that different tongues were spoken. The writings are also in varying forms of symbols and alphabets. A close examination discloses that some of the rock writings and pictures that have been assigned to the cliffs dwellers of North America are thousands of years older than others which appear within a stone's throw of them. These very ancient writings and pictures were executed before the mountains were raised, which is proved by the fact that some of the rocks on which they are written are fractured and displaced. In some instances the fracture divides the writing, and in others, characters are found 133 that have been split in two, one part appearing on one side of the fracture and the remainder on the other. This indicates that the rock was fractured and displaced as the ground was being elevated. Other writings as clearly reveal that they were written after the land was elevated. It is impossible to give here a detailed account of rock writings and rock pictures of North America. I have been compelled to confine myself to a few that cover two important points. First, those that give an approximate date of the civilization. Second, those that tell us the origin of the people, where they came from, and how they came to America. It is quite doubtful if all those classed as cliff dwellers actually belonged with that people. That is, certain writings assigned to the cliff dwellers were probably written by people who were not cliff dwellers at all. That the cliff dwellers came from Mu is certain, for every one of their pictures that are used as guideposts contains a reference to Mu. In fact, the rock writings and pictures of the cliff dwellers, except those drawn for artistic effect, are permeated with references to Mu, both before and after her submersion. In addition to this, they invariably used the symbols that were in vogue in the motherland. Among the rock writings I have found 4 different branches of the Maya language that were in use, also the evidence that these ancient Americans used 3 differently arranged alphabets. 134 Chapter 11 Nivens Mexican Buried Cities. The next step on leaving the United States will be to pass into Mexico. One of the most remarkable and, without doubt, most valuable geological and archaeological discoveries made has been achieved by William Niven, mineralogist of Mexico, who recorded it some years ago, but like all other American discoveries, it was apparently not considered in the slightest way by the scientific world. Niven's discovery has a twofold significance, for, in addition to enlightening the world about prehistoric man, and dating his civilization far back into the Tertiary era, thousands of years before the majestic mountain ranges raised their imposing peaks above the plains, it gives a clue to when the great gas belts were formed and mountains were raised. It shows that highly civilized races struggled through the most appalling and terrific volcanic workings the Earth has ever known. It shows that man was in existence and in a highly civilized state tens of thousands of years before the geological glacial period, and the European Pleistocene ape man. It also adds links to a chain of evidence showing that the Earth's civilization can be divided into 2 parts or periods, before and after what? The future will disclose. 135-136 above. Niven's Mexican buried cities now 7,000 feet above level of sea. Mountains 5,000 feet higher intervening, see also halftones. Niven's discovery being so valuable geologically and archaeologically, I cannot do better than to give his own wording about these ruins. Over an area of about 200 square miles in the Valley of Mexico, from Texcoco to Jalapantla, there are hundreds, yes thousands, of clay pits. After serving the city of Mexico as sources for building material for more than 300 years, these pits have enabled me to make an extensive examination of a vast ruin. Recently my efforts have been rewarded with some remarkable and startling discoveries, which seem to open up a new field for archaeological research on this continent. My operations have been confined to an area some 20 miles long by 10 miles wide, in the northwestern portion of the Great Valley. There I have found traces of 2 civilizations and 3 well-preserved concrete floors or pavements, each one at some time underlying a large city. These pavements are at depths of from 6 to 25 feet from the surface. Above the first there is a deposit of small boulders, pebbles and sand covered with a foot-thick coating of the rich soil of the valley. The great age of this upper or younger floor must be plain, when every layman stops to consider the number of years required to deposit 1 foot of earth on a level plain. Everywhere in this deposit of boulders, pebbles and sand above the first floor I found fragments of broken pottery, small clay figures, diorite beads, spear and arrow heads, spindle whorls and other artifacts, mostly broken. The second concrete floor is from 4 to 6 feet below the first, the difference in distance between the two being accounted for by the broken condition of the lower pavement, due probably to seismic disturbances. In the intervening space between the 2 pavements, 1 and 2, I have failed to find a single piece of pottery, or any other trace to indicate that people had once lived there. Underneath the second pavement, however, came the great find of my many years' work in Mexican archaeology. First I came upon a well-defined layer of ashes from 2 to 3 feet in thickness, and since proved by analysis to be of volcanic origin. Just below the ashes I found traces of innumerable buildings, large, but regular in size, and appearing uniformly in more than 100 clay pits, which I have examined during my recent investigations. All of these houses are badly ruined, crushed and filled with ashes and debris. In the past week's work I found a wooden door, the wood of which had petrified and turned to stone. The door was arched with a semicircular lintel, made by bending the trunk of a tree about 5 inches in diameter or thickness. This is the first curved arch ever found in the ruins of Mexico, and, as the walls of the house were laid of stone, bound together with a white cement, harder than the stone itself, this wooden arch must have been put in as an ornament. Cutting through the door, I came into a room about 30 feet square, filled with almost pure volcanic ash, apparently about the only room strong enough to withstand the terrible weight of soil, ashes and stone above it. The roof, which had been of concrete and stone, and flat, had caved in, but around the lower edges of the room great flat fragments of this roof had formed arches, little caves in the ashes, in which were preserved many of the artifacts of the dead race shown in the accompanying illustrations. With the artifacts were bones, numberless bones of human beings, which crumbled to the touch like slaked lime. Above their tomb the waters of a great flood had raged, wiping out another civilization. Flood and the crashing boulders had not disturbed the sleep of this mighty race. The doorway was over 6 feet deep, and on the floor, 13 feet from the door, I came upon a complete goldsmith's outfit. It consists of a terracotta chimney 25 inches in height, tapering upwards from a round furnace 15 inches in diameter. On the floor around the furnace, to which still adhered bits of pure gold, I found more than 200 models, which had once been baked clay, but which had been transformed into stone. All of these were duplications carved on figures and idols which I found later in the same house. Evidently this had been the house of a prosperous goldsmith and jeweler of the better class in this ruined city. 137 Some of the models or patterns were less than 1/20th of an inch in thickness, and were used for the manufacture of the gold, silver and copper dress, head, breast, arm and ankle ornaments which the statuettes show the people to have worn in those days. Each model was thickly coated with iron oxide, bright and yellow, probably put on there to prevent the molten metals adhering to the patterns while in the casting pot. Later on a thin gold plate made for the breast, and ornaments with characters unlike any found in Palenque or Mitla rewarded my search, and I have since found several of these results of the labors of the goldsmith. The work is fine, beautifully polished, and shows a height of civilization fully as great, if not greater, than that possessed by the Aztecs when the Spaniards under Hernando Cortés first invaded Mexico. But what struck me most as the remarkable feature of the room was the mural decorations. Evidently there had once been a slight partition through the center, while from the rear walls the dim outline of the door appeared to lead into another room, which is now so complete a ruin that I doubt that anything other than bones will be found in it. In the front part of the present room, however, the goldsmith evidently had his workshop, while in the back was the entrance to his residence. Here are wall paintings done in red, blue, yellow, green and black, which compare favorably with the best photographs I have ever seen of Greek, Etruscan or Egyptian works of the same kind. The ground color of the wall was a pale blue, while 6 inches down from the 14-foot ceiling a frieze painted in dark red and black ran all around the 4 sides. This frieze, owing to the fact that it had been glazed after painting, with a sort of native wax, is perfectly preserved, so far as colors and patterns go. It has been, however, broken in 3 places by fragments of the falling roof, but otherwise it is almost as legible as the day when first painted. It depicts the life of some person, evidently a shepherd, bringing him from babyhood to his deathbed. Beneath the room I found the tomb of someone of importance, possibly of him whose life was portrayed in the frieze above. In this vault, which was only 3 feet in depth and lined with cement, were 75 pieces of bone, all that remained of a complete skeleton. One large fragment of the skull contained the blade of a hammered copper axe, which had evidently dealt death to the occupant of the tomb, and which had not been removed by his relatives or friends. The bones crumbled to the touch, so long had they been in the tomb, but there were other objects more interesting than the bones. 125 small clay terracotta idols, mannequins, images and dishes of all kinds were ranged around the bottom of the tomb. 138 above, relics from Niven's lowest city I ancient Greek vase 2. Egyptian head 3. A toy 4. Little Chinaman. The most wonderful and striking of these is the terracotta figure shown on this page, Fig. 3. It has the form of a man in a sitting posture, his legs are crossed Japanese fashion, and the hands on the knees. The type is strongly Phoenician or Semitic, while the head is hollow and movable and can be removed from the image at will, being set on the neck by means of a cleverly devised truncated tenon, which fits into a mortise at the base of the skull. One must remember that the examination of this room is but a step on the edge of the mystery of this great ruin 200 square miles in area, and reveals nothing of the history of this wonderful people who have been completely lost to the knowledge of mankind. Less than 3 miles from this locality which I have just described I found an ancient riverbed now dry, in the sands and gravel of which were thousands of terracotta and clay figures having faces representing all of the races of southern Asia. The pottery and figures found at a depth, the lowest 18 feet below the surface, are the best, and it is reasonable to suppose that a people of such culture and of such manifold numbers had imposing temples and governmental edifices comparable with those of Mitla, Palenque and Chichen Itza. If so, when they are uncovered by future generations of archaeologists, the ashes which overlie this vast city will have preserved every ruin as perfectly as they did Pompeii and Herculaneum. 139. To my mind here will be found data that will prove the Aztecs the least important of the races which have peopled Mexico, and quite probably the latest to enter Mexican boundaries in that wonderful emigration that peopled North America in forgotten ages. Subsequent to the publication